You said you wanted to invest in my company. Chase laughed, swirling his glass of vintage Pinot Noir. He looked at my $5,000 savings book like it was a used napkin. You are a joke, Reginald. You are too poor to even breathe the same air as my investors. Leave before security drags you out. I stood there watching my daughter Maya look down at her shoes, refusing to meet my eyes. My heart shattered not because of his insults, but because of her silence. I placed the check back in my pocket and adjusted my old polyester suit. You are right, Chase, I said softly. I am not an investor. I am the market, and the market is about to correct you. 2 weeks later, his $12 million startup collapsed, and I was the one holding the demolition switch. But before I tell you how I destroyed his empire without lifting a finger, let me know in the comments if you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought money equaled class. Please hit like and subscribe to support the channel. It really helps bring these stories to light. My name is Reginald King. I am 73 years old. For 40 years, I worked as an electrical engineer, keeping the lights on for half the city of Chicago. My hands are calloused, my skin is dark like polished mahogany, and my hair is the color of winter frost. To the outside world, I am just a retired old man living on a pension driving a 10-year-old Ford sedan. But silence has always been my strategy. In a world that is constantly screaming for attention, the quiet man is the one you need to watch out for. The night that changed everything started with a gold-embossed invitation. It was the engagement party for my only daughter Maya and her fiancé, Chase Sterling. The venue was the Gilded Lily, a rooftop restaurant in Manhattan where a bottle of water costs more than my weekly grocery bill. I arrived 15 minutes early wearing my best Sunday suit. It was a charcoal gray suit I had bought 20 years ago for my wife Beatrice's funeral. It was clean pressed and smelled of lavender and mothballs, but the cut was outdated and the fabric had lost its sheen. I knew I did not fit in. The room was filled with men in Italian silk suits and women wearing diamonds that could feed a family for a year. They held champagne flutes like weapons, their laughter sharp and brittle. I stood by the entrance, clutching a small envelope in my hand. Inside was a savings book. It contained $5,000. To Chase Sterling, the CEO of a hot new energy startup, that amount was probably what he spent on a weekend getaway. But for me, it was sacrifice. It was overtime shifts during blizzards. It was skipping lunches. It was the money Beatrice and I had saved for a trip to Paris that we never got to take. After she passed, I kept saving, wanting to give it to Maya for her wedding. It was not just money. It was a piece of my life. I spotted Maya across the room. She looked beautiful in a silk cream dress, her hair styled in effortless waves. But she looked tense. Her smile did not reach her eyes. She was hovering near Chase, who was holding court with a group of potential investors. Chase was 30 years old, handsome in a predatory way, with bleached teeth and eyes that scanned the room for usefulness rather than connection. He saw me enter. His smile vanished instantly. He whispered something to Maya, and I saw her shoulders stiffen. She did not come to greet me. Instead, Chase excused himself from his circle and walked toward me, his movements aggressive and sharp. "Reginald," he said, not offering his hand. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of annoyance. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, trying to ignore the sting of his tone. "I am here for my daughter Chase. It is her engagement party." Chase sighed, running a hand through his perfectly gelled hair. "Look around you, Reginald. Look at these people. These are venture capitalists, tech moguls, people who control the economy. And then there is you." He gestured vaguely at my suit. "You look like you just walked off a bus from the 1980s. You are ruining the aesthetic. I am trying to close a Series B funding round tonight. Do you know what it looks like to have—" He paused, searching for a word that wouldn't sound explicitly racist but meant the same thing. "Someone of your demographic standing here looking like a charity case. It signals weakness. It signals that I make bad alliances." The air around us seemed to freeze. A few guests nearby stopped their conversations, their ears perking up at the tension. I kept my voice calm. "I learned a long time ago that anger is a gift you do not give to your enemies. I am family Chase. Family is not a business transaction." Chase laughed. A cold, dry sound. "Family. You think because your daughter shares a bed with me we are family. Maya is an asset. She is beautiful, articulate, and looks good on a magazine cover. You are a liability. You are the baggage she came with." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. I tolerated you at the family barbecue because there were no cameras. But tonight is about my brand. Sterling Energy is the future. You are the past. A dusty, broke, irrelevant past. My grip tightened on the envelope in my hand. I wanted to turn around and leave. My dignity demanded it. But I looked at Maya. She was watching us from across the room, her eyes wide with fear. She was not afraid for me. She was afraid of him. And that terrified me more than anything. I had to try. I had to show him that I was trying to contribute, that I was not just a taker. I pulled the savings book out of the envelope. "Chase," I said, my voice steady. "I know I am not a rich man. I know this world is different from mine. But I wanted to give you and Maya this. It is $5,000. It is for the wedding, or for the house. It is all I have available right now, but it comes with my blessing." I held it out to him. A peace offering. A bridge across the canyon of our differences. Chase looked at the small blue book in my calloused hand. He reached out and took it with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. He opened it, read the balance, and then looked at me with genuine amusement. $5,000, he announced, his voice suddenly loud enough for the entire room to hear. The chatter in the room died down. All eyes turned to us. Chase was performing now. He was playing to his audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, grinning, "my future father-in-law has just made a generous contribution to the Sterling Empire. $5,000. A ripple of polite, mocking laughter went through the crowd. I felt the heat rise up my neck. Chase turned back to me, his eyes dead and cruel. "Reginald, do you know how much this venue costs for 1 hour? Do you know how much the wine in this glass costs? This," he waved the book, "is not a gift. It is an insult. It is pocket change. It is not enough to tip the valet drivers for my guests." Then he did something that made time stop. He held the savings book over a waiter's tray that was passing by. On the tray was a half-empty glass of red wine. Chase dropped the book. It splashed into the dark liquid, the pages instantly soaking up the wine, turning the blue paper into a soggy purple mess. "Oops," Chase said, his face devoid of apology. "Clumsy hands. But honestly, it is where it belongs. Trash belongs with trash." The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at the glass. My 40 years of labor, my overtime, the nights I missed tucking Maya into bed because I was fixing a transformer in a snowstorm, all of it drowning in a glass of Merlot. I looked at Maya. "Please, baby," I thought, "say something, defend me. Tell him he is wrong. Tell him that money bought your textbooks, that money paid for your braces, that money kept the heat on when the winter was cruel." Maya took a step forward, her lips parted. She looked at Chase, who was staring at her with a challenge in his eyes, a silent threat. Choose him or choose the lifestyle. Maya looked at me, her eyes filling with tears, and then she looked down at the floor. She said nothing. She did not move. She let the silence stretch until it became a physical weight crushing the air out of my lungs. That was the moment my heart broke. Not because of the money, not because of the humiliation, but because I realized I had already lost her. She had sold her voice for a seat at his table. I took a deep breath. I did not shout. I did not make a scene. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. I wiped a speck of wine that had splashed onto my old suit jacket. "I understand," I said. My voice was low, deep, and carried a resonance that made the nearest guests shiver. "You have made your position very clear, Chase. And Maya, your silence speaks louder than any scream." Chase smirked, gesturing to the door. "Good. Now get out, before I have you escorted out for trespassing. You are not on the guest list anymore." I turned to leave, but I stopped after 2 steps. I turned back to face him one last time. "Chase," I said, "you judge a man by the cut of his suit and the balance in his visible bank account. That is a rookie mistake. You see, real power does not need to advertise. Real power is like electricity. You do not see it until you touch the wire and realize you are holding a lightning bolt." Chase rolled his eyes. "Save the philosophy for the nursing home, old man. Go." I nodded. "Keep the book," I said, pointing to the wine glass. "You might want to fish it out later, because very soon you are going to wish you had that $5,000. You just threw away your only life raft." I walked out of the Gilded Lily with my back straight and my head high. I did not look back at my daughter. I could feel the eyes of the room on my back dismissing me as a pathetic old man who had been put in his place. They went back to their drinks and their gossip before the elevator doors even closed. But they were wrong. I was not leaving in defeat. I was leaving to go to work. I took the elevator down to the lobby, the smooth jazz music mocking my inner turmoil. I walked out into the cool Manhattan night air. My hands were shaking not from age but from adrenaline. I pulled my ancient flip phone from my pocket. It was a rugged device, secure, untraceable. I dialed a number that I had not called in 5 years. It rang once. "Dante," I said when the line connected. Reggie, the voice on the other end, was sharp, alert. "It is late. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, watching the lights of the penthouse restaurant far above me. "It is time to wake the giant." "What do you mean?" Dante asked. "I mean Project Onyx," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "I want a full financial autopsy on Sterling Energy. I want to know who his investors are. I want to know his burn rate. I want to know where he hides his skeletons." "And Dante, yes, Reggie, clear my schedule for tomorrow morning. I am coming out of retirement. We are going hunting." I hung up the phone and got into my old Ford sedan. As I turned the key, the engine sputtered before roaring to life. Chase Sterling thought he had humiliated a poor old man. He did not know he had just declared war on the silent architect of the city's power grid. He thought I was broke. He was about to find out that I owned the switch, and I was getting ready to turn his lights out, permanently. The drive back to my house in Queens was silent. The only sound was the hum of my 10-year-old Ford sedan and the rhythmic thumping of my own heart. I did not turn on the radio. I needed the quiet to think. I needed to let the anger that was boiling in my gut cool down into something useful, something dangerous. Chase Sterling had called me a relic. He had called me broken. He looked at my worn-out suit and my calloused hands and saw a man who had given up. He saw a victim, but he forgot the most basic rule of engineering. Potential energy is invisible until it is converted into kinetic energy, and I was about to release a lot of kinetic energy. I pulled into the driveway of my home. To the neighbors, it was just another run-down, single-story brick house that had seen better days. The grass was a little too long. The paint on the window frames was peeling just enough to suggest that the owner was struggling to keep up with maintenance. There was a rusted tricycle in the yard that had belonged to Maya 30 years ago, which I kept there as a prop. It was perfect camouflage. In this neighborhood, if you looked too rich, you got robbed. If you looked too poor, you got ignored. I preferred to be ignored. I unlocked the front door with a key that looked standard but was actually laser cut to trigger a silent alarm if not turned with a specific amount of torque. I stepped inside. The hallway smelled of old books and lemon polish, the scent of a simple, lonely life. But I did not stop in the living room. I walked straight to the bookshelf at the end of the hall. I pulled the spine of a vintage copy of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. There was a soft click, and the heavy oak bookcase swung open silently on hydraulic hinges. Behind it was not a dusty storage closet. It was a climate-controlled server room bathed in the soft blue glow of LED status lights. The air inside was crisp and cool, humming with the sound of 3 high-density server racks. This was the real heart of my home. This was the headquarters of King Grid Solutions. I sat down in my ergonomic leather chair, a stark contrast to the lumpy sofa in the living room. I tapped the keyboard, and the 3 curved monitors in front of me flared to life. Rows of data streamed across the screens. Real-time energy consumption rates for the Eastern Seaboard, patent royalty deposits, investment dividends. You see, Chase was right about one thing. I was an electrical engineer, but I was not just a guy who fixed wires. Back in the late 90s, I developed a load-balancing algorithm for power grids. It was a way to redirect electricity during peak hours to prevent blackouts. I patented it quietly. Now every time a city in North America turns on its lights during a heat wave or a factory powers up its assembly line, a fraction of a cent travels through the banking system and lands in my offshore accounts. I was not a millionaire. I was a ghost. A very wealthy ghost. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Dante. I put him on speaker. "Talk to me, Dante." Reggie Dante's voice was crisp. He was the only person on earth who knew the full extent of my net worth. He was a sharp lawyer from the South Side who I had put through law school 20 years ago. He was more than an attorney. He was the son I never had. "I have just finished the deep dive on Sterling Energy," Dante said. "And Reggie, it is worse than we thought. It is not just bad, it is catastrophic." I leaned back, steepling my fingers. "Tell me." "The kid is running a Ponzi scheme without the Ponzi." Dante explained, the sound of shuffling papers coming through the line. "He has burned through his seed capital in 18 months. He has no proprietary technology. The solar panel efficiency data he is showing investors, it is faked. He copied the specs from a Chinese manufacturer and rebranded it. I chuckled darkly. So he is a fraud? It gets better. Dante continued. His personal burn rate is insane. That penthouse in Manhattan, leased. The Ferrari, leased. The engagement ring he gave Maya. He put it on a company credit card that is currently maxed out. He is robbing Peter to pay Paul, but Paul is already knocking at the door with a baseball bat. I looked at the screen where a photo of Maya was taped to the monitor. She was smiling, wearing her graduation cap and gown. I had paid for that degree with clean money. Honest money. And now she was marrying a man who was building a life on quicksand. How much time does he have, I asked. Dante sighed. Based on the accounts payable ledger I hacked into 2 weeks. Maybe 3. He has a $12 million loan coming due with a private equity firm that does not play nice. If he does not pay it or refinance it by the end of the month, they will seize everything. The company, the brand, his personal assets. He is desperate, Reggie. That is why he was so aggressive at the party tonight. He needs fresh blood. He needs a whale. I closed my eyes. I thought about the way Chase had looked at me. The disdain, the arrogance. He thought he was a shark swimming among minnows, but he was just a leech sucking the life out of everyone around him, including my daughter. I opened my eyes. The anger was gone. In its place was cold, hard resolve. Dante, I said, we are going to give him what he wants. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Excuse me? Dante asked, sounding confused. Reggie, did you hear me? The man is a sinking ship. You do not board a sinking ship. You let it drown. No, I said. If I let him fail naturally, he will drag Maya down with him. He will use her credit. He will ruin her reputation. He will blame the market or the economy or bad luck. He will play the victim, and Maya will spend the next 10 years trying to fix him because she has a heart too big for her own good. I know my daughter. She cannot resist a broken bird. So what is the play? Dante asked. We are going to buy him, I said. Set up a shell company. Call it Onyx Ventures. Make it look legit. Website fake board of directors offshore registration in the Caymans. Make it look like old money. Conservative. The kind of fund that does not ask too many technical questions but writes big checks. You want to invest in him? Dante asked, his voice rising. I want to own him, I corrected. We offer him the $12 million he needs, but we structure the deal with terms that look standard but are actually a noose. I want controlling interest, I want a seat on the board, and I want a clause that says if there is any financial impropriety or if the company fails to meet impossible benchmarks, the primary investor gets full liquidation rights to all assets, including his personal intellectual property and future earnings. Dante let out a low whistle. That is predatory, Reggie. That is the kind of contract sharks write for guppies. Exactly, I said. Chase is arrogant. He thinks he is the smartest person in the room. He will see the $12 million and he will not read the fine print. He will think he can outsmart the old money investors. He will sign it because he is drowning and we are the only water. But why, Reggie? Dante asked softly. Why spend $12 million on a man you hate because I need to be the one holding the demolition switch, I said, staring at the digital readout of the city's power grid on my screen. I need to be the one who turns off his lights. I need Maya to see him for what he really is. Not a victim of circumstance, but a fraud who sold her out. When I pull the plug, I want him to know it was me. I want him to know that the broke old man he laughed at is the one who owns the very ground he stands on. Set it up, Dante. Make the call tomorrow morning. Tell him Onyx Ventures has been watching him and we are impressed by his vision. I could hear the smile in Dante's voice. Consider it done, boss. This is going to be fun. I hung up the phone. The room was quiet again, save for the hum of the cooling fans. I stood up and walked over to the small kitchenette in the corner of the server room. I poured myself a glass of cheap bourbon. I did not drink the expensive stuff. I liked the burn. It reminded me of who I was. I looked at the bank of monitors one last time. From here, I could see the energy consumption of the entire city. I could see the spike in power at the Gilded Lily restaurant where the party was probably still going on. Chase was likely toasting to his own brilliance, thinking he had cleared the room of the trash. Enjoy your champagne, Chase, I whispered to the empty room. Drink up, because tomorrow you belong to me. I turned off the monitors, plunging the room into darkness. I stepped back out into the hallway, closing the hidden door behind me. I walked into my modest bedroom and lay down on the bed with the quilt Beatrice had sewn by hand. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I lay there visualizing the trap I had just set. It was a high-voltage trap. And Chase Sterling was walking right into it, barefoot and blindfolded. The next morning, the sun rose over Queens with a gray industrial light. I woke up at 5 a.m., just like I had every day for 40 years. I made a pot of strong coffee and sat on my porch watching the neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Higgins across the street was walking her poodle. The garbage truck was making its rounds. It was a normal, quiet morning, but inside my pocket, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dante. "The bait is in the water." He bit. Meeting set for Tuesday. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted better than usual. The game had officially begun. I was no longer Reginald, the retired engineer. I was Onyx. And I was about to teach a very expensive lesson in humility. I stood up and went inside to iron my suit. Not the old gray one. I went to the back of my closet and pulled out a garment bag that had not been opened in years. Inside was a bespoke suit tailored in London black as midnight. I wouldn't wear it yet, not until the trap was sprung, but I wanted to make sure it was ready, just like me. If you are enjoying this story so far and you want to see exactly how Chase reacts when he realizes who really holds the purse strings, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It helps me tell more stories like this. And let me know in the comments, have you ever had to hide your success just to see who your real friends were? I read every single comment. Now let's get back to the story because things are about to get very complicated for our friend Chase. The morning after the disastrous engagement party, I sat in my home office surrounded by the hum of my servers. On one screen, I had access to the security cameras in the lobby of Sterling Energy. On another, I had a live audio feed from my daughter's phone. I had installed a parental safety app on her device years ago when she went to college and she had never asked me to remove it. I never used it to spy on her privacy until today. Today, it was not spying, it was reconnaissance. I listened as Chase called her. It was barely 9 in the morning and his voice was already ragged with stress and misplaced aggression. "Maya, you need to fix this," Chase screamed into the phone. I could hear the desperation clawing at his throat. "I have 3 investors pulling out this morning because they think we are a joke. And do you know why? Because your father showed up looking like he was there to unclog the toilets." I gripped the edge of my desk. My knuckles turned the color of ash. I wanted to reach through the phone and crush the life out of him, but I forced myself to breathe. "Discipline, Reginald. Discipline." Chase continued his tirade. "He is a liability, Maya. I do not care if he is your father. If he shows up to the wedding looking like that, I will have security throw him out. And do not ask me for money for the deposit. We are tapped out until I close a new lead. You better hope this meeting with Onyx Ventures goes well, or we are all out on the street." He hung up without saying goodbye. I took a sip of my cold coffee. Onyx Ventures. That was me. Or rather, that was Dante. It was time to go fishing. At 10 o'clock sharp, Dante walked into the glass-walled offices of Sterling Energy. I watched the feed from a hidden camera button on Dante's jacket. The office was a masterpiece of illusion. It had sleek, mid-century modern furniture, a ping-pong table that no one used, and a juice bar stocked with organic kale blends. It was designed to look like a billion-dollar playground. But I looked closer. The desks were mostly empty. The few employees present were scrolling through job search websites on their screens. The air in the room smelled of fear and expensive cologne. Chase was waiting in the conference room. He had tried to make himself look busy spreading papers across the table that I knew were meaningless charts. When Dante walked in, Chase jumped up a little too quickly. He smoothed his suit, flashing that salesman smile that I had come to despise. "Mr. Sterling," Dante said, his voice smooth as velvet. "I am Dante Vance, representing the Onyx Group." Chase extended his hand, his eyes hungry. "Mr. Vance, please call me Chase. I have heard so much about Onyx. You guys are legends in the private equity world." Dante sat down, unbuttoning his Italian blazer. "We prefer to stay under the radar, Chase. We like to find diamonds in the rough, and we think Sterling Energy might be our next diamond." I watched Chase's face. The relief was palpable. He looked like a man who had just been pulled from a burning building. "I am glad you see the vision," Chase said, leaning back and trying to regain his composure. "What we are doing here is revolutionary. We are not just an energy company. We are a lifestyle brand. We are disrupting the grid. Dante nodded, tapping a folder on the table. Impressive. But my partners are numbers men. Chase, they do not care about lifestyle. They care about the tech. Tell me about the algorithm. Your prospectus says you have developed a proprietary load balancing system that increases efficiency by 40%. That is a bold claim. Chase cleared his throat. He stood up and walked to the whiteboard. He began to draw a diagram. As I watched from my dark room in Queens, I felt a strange mixture of anger and amusement. The diagram he was drawing was nonsense. It was a jumble of buzzwords and basic electrical theory that a first-year engineering student would laugh at. Well, Chase began putting on his serious innovator face. The key is in the quantum nodes. We use a decentralized blockchain ledger to reroute power packets during peak consumption. It is basically like Uber for electricity. The grid learns, it adapts. I wrote the core code myself over a weekend in Cabo. I almost choked on my coffee. Quantum nodes. Blockchain power packets. He was throwing words into a blender and hoping they tasted like intelligence. There was no such thing as his code. The load balancing he was describing was a bastardized version of the King protocol, my protocol mixed with pure science fiction. Dante, who knew exactly who the real inventor was, kept a straight face. He tapped his earpiece lightly, a signal that he was switching the audio to high fidelity so I could hear every breath. Fascinating, Dante said. And the intellectual property rights, they are fully secured 100%. Chase lied without blinking. I own it all. No co-founders, no lingering patent disputes. It is all sterling. I leaned into my microphone, whispering into Dante's earpiece. Ask him about the thermal runaway safeguards. Dante looked up at Chase. One question from my technical lead. Chase, how do you handle thermal runaway in the substations if the load shifts too quickly? Chase froze. For a split second, the mask slipped. He had no idea what thermal runaway was. Panic flickered in his eyes. We have a software patch for that, Chase stammered. It is in the beta testing phase. But it is solid. Very solid. It was the answer of a con artist. A software patch for a physical thermal overload. It would be funny if it were not so dangerous. This man was not just a thief, he was a reckless amateur who could blow up a city block if he was actually allowed near a power grid. Dante nodded slowly as if satisfied. Good enough for us. Dante opened the leather portfolio he had brought with him. He slid a thick document across the mahogany table. We have seen enough, Chase. Onyx Ventures is prepared to offer you a lifeline, $12 million. Chase's eyes widened. He looked at the check that Dante had placed face down on the table. He was practically drooling. 12 million, Chase breathed. That is fantastic. That is exactly the runway we need. There are conditions, Dante said, his voice hardening slightly. We are not a charity. We are buying 40% of Sterling Energy, and we want full financial oversight. One of our representatives will sit on your board. Chase hesitated. 40% was a huge chunk of his company. It was a bruise to his ego. But I knew the math he was doing in his head. He had $12 million of debt coming due. He had payroll to meet. He had a wedding to pay for. He had no choice. 40% is steep, Chase muttered, trying to negotiate. I was thinking more like 20. $12 million, Chase, Dante repeated coldly. Take it or leave it. The wire transfer is ready to go right now. Or I can walk out that door and you can explain to your fiancé why her credit cards are declining tomorrow morning. The mention of Maya was the final nail. Chase knew he was cornered. Fine, Chase said, grabbing a pen. 40%. Where do I sign? Dante flipped the contract to the last page. He pointed to the signature line, but he also tapped a thick paragraph just above it. This was Appendix 17, the poison pill. Just standard boilerplate here, Dante said casually, waving a hand. Basically says that if you are a good boy, you get to keep running the show. But we need to protect our investment against gross negligence or fraud. Just sign here, and initial here. Chase did not read it. He did not even glance at the text. His eyes were glued to the check. He scribbled his signature with a flourish, pressing down so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. Done, Chase said, handing the contract back with a triumphant grin. Welcome to the future, Dante. Dante took the contract and checked the signature. He placed it carefully back into his portfolio. Thank you, Chase. Dante said, standing up. The money will be in your account within the hour. Do not spend it all in one place. Oh, do not worry. Chase laughed, already reaching for his phone to call his Porsche dealer. We are going to the moon. Dante turned to leave. At the door, he paused and looked back at Chase. By the way, my senior partner sends his regards. He said he hopes the wedding is spectacular. Chase waved him off, too distracted by his victory to wonder how a private equity shark knew about his wedding. I sat back in my chair in Queens. The screen showed Chase jumping up and down, pumping his fist in the air like he had just scored a touchdown. He had no idea. I picked up the copy of the contract I had drafted myself. I turned to Appendix 17. I read the words out loud to the empty room, savoring the taste of them. In the event of any discovered financial malfeasance, misrepresentation of intellectual property, or ethical violations deemed damaging to the company reputation, the primary investor reserves the right to immediate capital recall. Furthermore, all personal assets of the CEO, including future earnings and intellectual property, shall serve as collateral and be subject to immediate seizure. He had just signed his death warrant. He had just handed me the keys to his life, his car, his apartment, and his future, and he did it with a smile. I texted Dante, good work. Initiate the transfer. Let him feel rich for a few days. The fall is harder when you are standing on a pedestal. I closed my laptop. I felt a deep, cold satisfaction settling in my chest. It was not joy. It was the feeling of a circuit being completed. The current was flowing now. The voltage was building, and Chase Sterling was standing in a puddle of water holding a live wire. Now I had to wait. I had to let him spend the money. I had to let him dig the hole deeper. I had to wait for the wedding. That was where the execution would take place. In front of the cameras, in front of the world, in front of Maya. I looked at the picture of Maya on my desk again. I am sorry, baby girl, I whispered. This is going to hurt, but sometimes you have to break a bone to reset it properly. If you are wondering how far Chase will go now that he thinks he is untouchable, or how I managed to keep my cool while he spent my money on a new sports car, make sure you are subscribed. You do not want to miss the next part. And tell me in the comments, if you were in my shoes, would you have warned him or would you have let him sign? I think we all know the answer. Stay tuned. The storm is coming. 2 days after Chase signed the contract with Onyx Ventures, I asked my daughter to meet me for lunch. I did not choose the Gilded Lily or any of the glass and steel towers where Chase liked to play pretend. I chose Sal's Diner on 4th Street, a place with cracked red vinyl seats and the smell of frying bacon that had been soaked into the walls since 1980. This was where I used to take Maya for pancakes after her math tutoring sessions. It was a place of truth, a place where you could not hide behind a fancy menu or a sommelier. I wanted to look my daughter in the eye without the glare of a chandelier getting in the way. I arrived 20 minutes early. I ordered her favorite, a grilled cheese sandwich with tomato soup and a side of pickles. I sat in the corner booth watching the steam rise from the soup, my hands folded on the table. When Maya walked in, the air in the diner seemed to shift. She was wearing a designer blazer that cost more than the car parked outside, and she was clutching a handbag that looked heavy, not with items, but with the weight of the status it was supposed to project. She did not look like the little girl who used to blow bubbles in her milk here. She looked tired. Her eyes were darting around the room, checking her phone every 3 seconds. She slid into the booth opposite me, not bothering to take off her sunglasses immediately. She looked at the grilled cheese sandwich with a mix of nostalgia and disdain. "Dad, I do not have much time," she said, her voice tight. "Chase is in the middle of a major restructuring. He is scaling up. I have to be back at the office in 45 minutes to approve the press release for the wedding." I looked at her, really looked at her. Underneath the makeup and the expensive blowout, I saw the fatigue. I saw the tremor in her hand as she reached for her water. "Hello to you too, Maya," I said gently. "I just wanted to see you. We have not really talked since the engagement party." Maya stiffened. She finally took off her sunglasses, revealing dark circles she had tried to conceal. "Dad, please, do not start." Chase was under a lot of pressure that night. You have no idea what it takes to run a company at his level. The stress is unimaginable. I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter just the way I liked it. Stress is one thing, Maya. Cruelty is another. But I am not here to talk about his manners. I am here to talk about his math. Maya rolled her eyes, a gesture she had perfected in her teenage years. Oh God. Here we go. The lecture. Let me guess you think we are spending too much on the flowers? Or maybe you think the band is too extravagant. Dad, this is not a backyard barbecue. This is the event of the season. It is not about the flowers, I said, leaning forward. It is about the foundation. Maya, I know you love him, but I have been around a long time. I know what desperation looks like. I know what it looks like when a man is borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I could not tell her about Onyx, not yet. I had to see if she could see the truth on her own. I have heard rumors. I lied smoothly. People in the industry talk. They say Sterling Energy is hollow. They say he is looking for a bailout. Maya, if you marry him, his debts become your debts. His failures become your failures. Are you sure you know what you are signing up for? Maya slammed her hand down on the table. The cutlery rattled. A few people at the counter turned to look, but I did not break eye contact. Stop it, she hissed. Just stop it. You are so jealous, it is pathetic. Jealous? I asked, genuinely confused. Yes, jealous, she cried, her voice rising. You cannot stand that he is successful. You cannot stand that he dreams big. You spent your whole life working for a paycheck, fixing wires, punching a clock. You were a worker bee, Dad. Chase is a queen bee. He is a visionary. He is going to change the world, and you are sitting here in a greasy diner telling me he is a fraud because you cannot understand his genius. The words hit me like physical blows. Worker bee, punching a clock. She spoke them with such venom as if honest labor was a disease she was afraid to catch. Maya, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, being a visionary does not pay the mortgage. Integrity pays the mortgage. I am just asking you to open your eyes. Has he shown you the books? Do you know where the money for this wedding is actually coming from? He just closed a $12 million deal, Maya shouted, standing up. She did not care who was watching anymore. A major investment firm just backed him. Do you think they would give him millions if he was a fraud? You are just bitter because you are small. Dad, you have always been small. You live in that tiny house driving that junk car, hoarding your pennies. You do not understand how the real world works. She grabbed her bag, her chest heaving. I stood up too, reaching for her hand. Maya, please. I am trying to protect you. Do not touch me. She pulled away. Do not call me Dad. Do not text me. And do not show up at the apartment. Unless you call to apologize and show Chase the respect he deserves, I do not want you in my life. You are toxic. You are negative energy, and we do not have room for that. She turned on her heel and stormed out of the diner. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully, a stark contrast to the silence she left behind in the booth. I sat back down. I looked at the grilled cheese sandwich. The cheese had congealed. The soup had a film on top. I felt a heavy, dull ache in my chest, right where my heart used to beat with pride for her. Small. She called me small. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was not in the diner anymore. I was back in our living room 15 years ago. It was a Tuesday. It was raining. Beatrice, my late wife, had been gone for 2 years. Maya was 18. She had just gotten into Columbia University. It was her dream school. We had celebrated with sparkling cider and cake, but then the tuition bill came. It was a number that made my stomach turn over. I had savings, but not enough. The pension from the power company was good, but it was not Ivy League good. I remembered standing in the living room looking at the baby grand piano in the corner. It was a Steinway. It had been Beatrice's most prized possession. She used to play jazz on Sunday mornings, her fingers dancing over the keys, filling our modest home with music that sounded like gold. That piano was the soul of our house. It was the only thing of real value we owned besides the house itself. I remembered the day the appraisers came. They were respectful, wearing white gloves. They ran their hands over the polished wood. They offered me $40,000. It was exactly what we needed for the first 2 years of tuition and housing. I remembered signing the paper. My hand shook then, just like it was shaking now. I remembered watching the movers wrap the piano in thick blankets, strapping it to a dolly. It looked like they were carrying a body out of the house. When they wheeled it out the door, the living room looked enormous. It looked empty. There was a dent in the carpet where the legs had stood for 20 years. I sat on the floor right on that dent, and I wept. I cried because I felt like I was selling my wife's voice. I cried because I was a father who had to choose between his past and his daughter's future. But I never told Maya. When she came home from school that day and asked where the piano was, I lied. I told her the humidity was ruining the soundboard and I had sent it to a specialist for long-term storage. I told her I got a big bonus at work to cover her tuition. I told her that her brilliance had earned her a scholarship that covered the rest. I lied because I wanted her to walk into that university with her head held high. I did not want her to worry about money. I did not want her to feel the weight of my sacrifice. I wanted her to feel like she belonged there among the children of bankers and senators. I created a world where she could feel rich even though we were scraping by. And now, 15 years later, sitting in Sal's diner, that lie had come back to bite me. I had protected her so well that she had lost touch with reality. I had shielded her from the struggle so effectively that she now despised the very hands that had lifted her up. She thought money fell from the sky or from visionaries like Chase. She did not know it came from selling the things you loved most. She called me small. If only she knew how much of myself I had carved away to make her big. I opened my eyes. The waitress, an older woman named Brenda who knew me, came over with the check. She looked at the uneaten food and then at me with sympathetic eyes. "She left in a hurry, huh?" Brenda asked softly. "Yeah," I said, my voice raspy. "She has big business to attend to." Brenda patted my shoulder. "Kids, they think they know everything until the bill comes due." I pulled out my wallet. It was a worn leather one, fraying at the edges. I took out a $20 bill and placed it on the table. "Keep the change, Brenda." I walked out of the diner. The sun was shining, but I felt cold. My resolve, which had been shaken for a moment by her words, hardened into something unbreakable. Maya thought I was jealous. She thought I was a bitter old man. She wanted me to respect Chase. Fine. I would show them respect. I would respect the contract Chase signed. I would respect the laws of economics. And I would respect the painful lesson that was about to crash down on their heads. I pulled out my phone and dialed Dante. "Reggie." "How did it go?" Dante asked. "Initiate the next phase," I said. My voice was devoid of emotion. I sounded like the machine that ran the grid. "Did she listen?" Dante asked. "No," I said, watching a city bus rumble past. "She is blind, Dante. She is dazzled by the light. So we have to turn it off so she can see the stars again." "What do you want to do?" "Chase is going to start spending that money today," I said. "He is going to try to hide his debts, monitor every transaction, every latte, every wire transfer, every payment. I want a daily report." And Dante, "Yes, get the audit team ready. We are going to schedule a surprise inspection. But not yet. Let him feel safe. Let him buy the flowers. Let him book the band. Let him build the castle." I got into my car. I looked at the empty passenger seat where Maya used to sit when she was a little girl, singing along to the radio. "I love you, Maya," I whispered to the silence. "And because I love you, I am going to let your world collapse. It is the only way to get you out of the wreckage." I started the engine. The old Ford roared to life, a low, steady rumble. I was not a queen bee. I was not a visionary. I was the storm that was coming to wash the slate clean. And God help anyone who stood in my way. If you have ever made a sacrifice for someone who didn't appreciate it, or if you have ever had to let a loved one fail so they could learn, hit that like button. It is a hard thing to do, maybe the hardest thing a parent can do. Let me know in the comments, was I right to keep the secret about the piano? Or should I have told her the truth years ago? Your thoughts might help me figure out where I went wrong. But for now, the die is cast. The trap is set. And the wedding bells are about to sound a lot like a funeral toll. The notification on my phone lit up the dark server room at 2 in the morning. It was a simple text message from a number that did not exist in any public directory. It read simply, "The feed is live." I sat up in my leather chair, adjusting the quilt around my shoulders. The air conditioning in the server room was humming, keeping the machines cool, but inside my chest a fire was beginning to burn. I clicked the link. On my center monitor, a high-definition video stream flickered to life. It was shaky at first, the camera angle low and hidden, likely concealed in a button or a tie clip. The audio crackled with the sound of wind and the heavy bass of electronic dance music. The image stabilized. I was looking at the deck of the Lady Arabella, a 70-foot luxury yacht currently drifting in the middle of the Hudson River. The deck was awash in purple neon light. Champagne corks were popping like gunfire. Young women in bikinis who I certainly did not recognize as friends of my daughter were dancing on the leather seats. And there in the center of it all, holding a magnum bottle of Cristal like a scepter, was Chase Sterling. He was wearing a white linen suit unbuttoned to his navel. He looked like a king who had just conquered a kingdom he did not earn. I leaned closer to the screen. My own money paid for that champagne. My own money paid for the fuel in that boat. My own money paid for the arrogance on his face. He had charged the entire party to the Onyx Ventures corporate expense account under the label of client acquisition. The camera moved. The person wearing it was walking through the crowd. This was not a guest. This was Marcus, a private investigator I had hired 3 days ago. Marcus was a former Navy SEAL who now specialized in corporate espionage. Tonight, he was playing the role of a waiter. I watched as Marcus moved through the crowd carrying a tray of oysters. He was invisible to them. People like Chase do not see the help. To them, waiters are just moving furniture that occasionally serves food. That was their mistake. The invisible man sees everything. Marcus maneuvered closer to the VIP section where Chase was holding court with 3 of his groomsmen. These were men cut from the same cloth, loud, brash, and dripping with unearned confidence. I turned up the volume on my speakers. The wind noise was filtered out by Marcus's high-end equipment, leaving the voices clear and sharp. To Sterling, one of the groomsmen shouted, raising a glass. To the man who pulled off the miracle $12 million from Onyx. "How did you do it, bro?" Chase laughed, throwing his head back. He took a long swig from the bottle, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "It is called charm, gentlemen," Chase slurred. His eyes were glassy. "Pure, unadulterated charm." I walked into that meeting, I flashed a few smiles, threw around some buzzwords about blockchain and quantum grids, and those suits ate it up. They practically begged me to take the money. "But what about the tech?" another friend asked, laughing. "Does it actually work?" Chase winked. "Who cares if it works? It just has to look like it works until the IPO. Once we go public next year, I cash out, buy my island, and let the engineers figure out the mess." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. He was admitting to fraud. Openly. If I was a petty man, I would have sent this recording to the SEC right now. But I was not petty. I was patient. I needed more. I needed him to hang himself completely. The conversation shifted. The third friend, a guy named Brad, who I remembered meeting at the engagement party, leaned in. "So what about the girl?" Brad asked. "Maya. Is she coming to the island with you?" Chase scoffed. He set the bottle down and lit a cigar. The flame illuminated his face, twisting it into a demonic mask. "Maya is useful," Chase said, blowing smoke into the night air. "Look, she looks great in photos. She has that whole educated, supportive partner vibe that investors love. It tests well with the focus groups. A stable family man gets better valuation than a playboy." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was talking about my daughter like she was a marketing asset, a prop. "But man," Chase continued, his voice dropping lower, dripping with venom. "The baggage she comes with. Her old man. That guy is a nightmare." Reginald Brad laughed. "The guy in the polyester suit." "Yeah, the electrical dinosaur," Chase sneered. "He is embarrassing. He showed up at my engagement party with a $5,000 check. Can you believe that? $5,000. I spend that on detailing my car." The group erupted in laughter. I sat in my dark room staring at their open mouths, their shaking shoulders. They were laughing at 40 years of labor. They were laughing at the sacrifices of a generation they stood on top of. Chase waved his hand to silence them. "But do not worry, boys. I have a plan." "What plan?" Chase leaned in closer to the hidden camera, his face filling the frame on my monitor. "Once the company goes public and the money is secure, I am filing for divorce," he whispered conspiratorially. "I will give her a nice settlement to keep her quiet. Maybe buy her a condo in Jersey so she is far away. But I cannot be married to her long term. She is too clingy." And her father, Chase, paused. A dark look crossed his face. "I am hoping nature takes its course with him," Chase said coldly. "The guy is 73. He eats diner food. Hopefully his heart gives out soon and saves me the trouble of banning him from my house. He is a stain on my brand. I need him gone. Dead or gone, I do not care which. The air left the room. I sat there frozen. He did not just want my money. He did not just want my daughter. He wanted me dead. He wished for my death so he wouldn't have to look at a poor black man at his dinner table. I watched as his friends toasted to that. To nature taking its course, they cheered. Chase raised his bottle. To a clean slate, he shouted. I reached out and paused the video. The image froze on Chase's face, his mouth open in a laugh, his eyes dead and cruel. I did not scream. I did not throw the monitor across the room. A strange calm washed over me. It was the calm of a judge who has heard all the evidence and is ready to deliver the sentence. For the last few days, a small part of me had felt guilty. A small voice in the back of my head had whispered that maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe he was just a desperate kid making mistakes. Maybe I was ruining Maya's happiness because of my own pride. That voice was dead now. Chase had killed it with a single sentence. He wanted nature to take its course. Fine. I am a force of nature. I am the lightning that strikes the tree. I am the flood that washes away the foundation. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady. I typed a message to Dante. I have the footage. He just admitted to fraud and wished for my death. The mercy period is over. Dante replied instantly. What is the move, Reggie? Do we pull the funding now? No, I typed back. That is too easy. If we pull the funding now, he just goes bankrupt. He blames the economy. He walks away with his ego intact. I want to destroy him publicly. I want to strip him of his name, his reputation, and his freedom. Let the party continue, I instructed. Let him think he is a king. Let him have the wedding. We strike when he is at the highest point. We strike when the cameras are rolling. I looked back at the frozen image of Chase. You made a mistake, son, I said to the screen. You thought poverty was my weakness. You thought silence was submission. You forgot that the most dangerous things in the world are the ones you do not see until it is too late. I opened a new window on my computer. I pulled up the financial spreadsheet for Sterling Energy. I watched the numbers refreshing in real time. He was burning cash at an alarming rate. The yacht party alone had cost $50,000. Good, I whispered. Spend it. Spend every dime. Dig the hole so deep that you will never see the sun again. I stood up and walked to the window of my small bedroom. I looked out at the streetlights illuminating the quiet neighborhood. My neighbors were sleeping. They were good people. Honest people. They worked hard, raised their kids, and treated each other with respect. Chase Sterling thought he was better than them. He thought he was a different species. I placed my hand on the cold glass. Maya, I said softly into the darkness, I am going to hurt you. I am going to break your heart. And I am going to hate myself for it every single day. But I cannot let you marry a monster. I cannot let you wake up in 10 years with a man who wishes your father was dead. I went back to the desk and saved the video file. I named it simply The Evidence. Then I did something I had not done in years. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was my wife's wedding ring. I rubbed my thumb over the gold band. Beatrice, I whispered. He laughed at us. He laughed at everything we built. I put the ring back. You are done, Chase, I said, my voice filling the empty room with the weight of a final verdict. You are absolutely done. I turned off the monitors. The room went black. But in the darkness, I was wide awake. The plan was no longer just a financial maneuver. It was an execution. And I was the executioner. If you are listening to this and your blood is boiling just like mine was, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments if you heard your future son-in-law wish you were dead. Would you stop the wedding immediately, or would you wait for the perfect moment to expose him? I chose the path of maximum destruction. And trust me, the wedding day is going to be a spectacle that no one will ever forget. In the world of electrical engineering, there is a procedure called a stress test. Before you approve a system for full operation, you simulate a crisis. You overload the circuit just a little bit to see if the safety mechanisms hold or if the whole thing bursts into flames. I had the evidence to destroy Chase Sterling. I had the contract that gave me ownership of his life. I had the video of him wishing for my death. But there was one variable I had not tested yet: my daughter. I needed to know if Maya was truly lost. I needed to know if the little girl I raised, the one who used to cry when she saw a stray cat in the rain, was still in there somewhere beneath the layers of designer clothes and psychological conditioning. I needed to give her one last chance to choose her father over her fiancé. It was 3 days before the wedding. I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had taught her how to tie her shoes. On the table in front of me was a glass of water and a bottle of vitamins. I did not need them, but they helped me get into character. I was about to give the performance of a lifetime. I picked up my old phone. My hand hovered over the dial button. I hesitated. A part of me, the father part, was terrified. I was terrified that she would fail the test. I was terrified that she would prove that my sacrifices meant nothing to her. But the engineer in me knew that you cannot build a future on a faulty foundation. I had to know the structural integrity of my family. I pressed the button. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, she picked up. Her voice was breathless, surrounded by the ambient noise of a busy room. I could hear the rustle of fabric and the murmur of voices. She was at a fitting. "Hello, Dad, is everything okay?" I am in the middle of my final dress fitting. I let out a ragged cough. I made my voice sound thin, trembling, the voice of a man who was scared and alone. "Maya," I said, wheezing slightly into the receiver. "I am sorry to bother you, baby. I know you are busy, but I am at the clinic." "The clinic." Maya's voice sharpened. "What is wrong? Are you sick?" "It is my chest." I lied. "The doctor says I need an emergency procedure. It is a blockage. They can fix it. But my insurance, it does not cover the deductible. They need $2,000 up front, Maya, or they are going to send me home." There was a silence on the line. $2,000. To the man who had just secured a $12 million investment, $2,000 was a rounding error. It was less than the cost of the champagne Chase had sprayed into the river on his yacht. I held my breath. This was it. "Dad," Maya said, her voice softening. "Oh my God. Of course. Do not worry. I can transfer it to you right now. Just give me your account number." My heart soared. She was going to do it. She still cared. She was still my Maya. I felt a tear prick the corner of my eye, a tear of relief. "Thank you, baby," I whispered. "I knew I could count on you." "Wait, hold on," I heard her say, but not to me. She was talking to someone else. "Chase, can you hand me my purse? My dad is in the hospital. He needs help with a bill." The atmosphere on the call shifted instantly. I heard footsteps, heavy, aggressive footsteps. Then I heard his voice. It was muffled at first, then loud and clear as he evidently snatched the phone from her hand. "Hospital," Chase barked. "What is this about, Chase, please?" Maya's voice pleaded in the background. "He is sick. He needs $2,000 for a procedure." $2,000. Chase laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. He put the phone to his ear. I could feel his sneer coming through the connection. "Listen to me," Reginald, Chase said. His voice was not loud, but it was cold as ice. "I know what you are doing. You are trying to guilt trip us before the wedding. You think because we just closed a big deal, we are your personal ATM. "Chase, I am in pain," I said, keeping up the act, though my anger was starting to boil. "I just need a loan. I will pay you back from my pension." "Your pension is a joke," Chase spat. "And so are you. We have a budget to stick to, old man. The flowers alone cost $20,000. We are not diverting funds to patch up a broken-down engine that is destined for the scrapyard anyway." "Chase," I heard Maya scream, "give me the phone. He is my father." "Shut up, Maya," Chase roared. I flinched. I had never heard him yell at her like that. "You need to stop enabling him. This is how leeches work. You feed them once they come back for more. If he is sick, he can go to the free county hospital. That is where people like him belong." "Chase, please," I said, dropping the weak voice. I was Reginald now. "Chase, if you have any humanity in you." "Humanity does not buy waterfront property." Reginald Chase cut me off. "And let's be honest, you are not sick. You are just pathetic. You are trying to buy a better suit so you do not look like a clown at my wedding. Well, guess what? You are not getting a dime. In fact, I am doing you a favor. I am cutting the cord." I heard a struggle on the other end. Maya was crying now. "Dad, Dad, I am so sorry. I will." She was cut off. You are done, Maya, Chase said to her, his voice dangerously low. If you send him 1 cent, the wedding is off. Do you hear me? You choose right now. Me, the man who is going to give you the world, or the old man who is dragging you down to the gutter. Choose. There was a pause, a long, agonizing pause. I closed my eyes. I prayed. Choose me, Maya. Please, just walk away. Leave him. But she did not. I heard a sob, then a small broken whisper. I choose you, Chase. Good girl, Chase said. Then he spoke into the phone one last time. Do not call this number again, Reginald. Consider this your invitation, uninvitation. If you show up at the resort, I will have you arrested for harassment. Goodbye. The line went dead. I sat there in my kitchen holding the silent phone to my ear. I did not move. I did not breathe. The silence in the house was absolute. It was heavy like a shroud. I looked at the glass of water on the table. A fly had landed on the rim. I watched it crawl, indifferent to the tragedy that had just occurred. My daughter had made her choice. She had chosen the abuser. She had chosen the money. She had chosen the illusion. Slowly, I lowered the phone. I placed it on the table face down. The screen was black, just like my heart. I stood up. I walked to the sink and poured the glass of water down the drain. I did not need the vitamins. I did not need the act. The sick old man was gone. He had died the moment that phone call ended. I walked down the hallway to the hidden door. I opened the server room. The blue lights greeted me like old friends. I sat down at my command center. I pulled up the live feed from the tracking software I had installed on Chase's devices. I could see their location. They were at the bridal shop. I could see his recent transactions. 5 minutes after hanging up on me, he had purchased a vintage watch for himself for $12,000. He had denied me $2,000 for a life-saving surgery and spent 6 times that amount on a watch to check the time while he watched me die. I looked at the calendar on the wall. The wedding was in 48 hours. Dante, I said, speaking into the voice command system. Yes, Reggie, the automated system replied, patching me through to my lawyer instantly. It is time, I said. My voice was steady. It was deep. It was the voice of a man who had nothing left to lose. Did the test fail? Dante asked gently. No, I said. The test was a complete success. We identified the weak points. We identified the catastrophic failure in the system. So, do we pull the plug? No, I said, we do not just pull the plug. We overload the grid. I want you to prepare the final dossier. Get the forensic accountant to certify the embezzlement. Get the private investigator to edit the footage of the yacht party for maximum impact. And Dante, yes, get my tuxedo ready, the one I bought in London. And book a helicopter. A helicopter, Dante asked, surprised. The wedding is at the Cliffside Resort, isn't it? I said, staring at the map on my screen. The roads will be blocked by security. Chase will have a blacklist. He will expect me to come crawling to the gate, begging to be let in. I paused. I am not coming by road, Dante. I am coming from above. I am going to rain on his parade, quite literally. I hung up. I turned back to the screen. I opened a new file. I typed in a command code that I had written years ago, a code designed to freeze assets across multiple international banking platforms simultaneously. It was my nuclear option. I hovered my finger over the enter key. You wanted me to go to the county hospital, Chase, I whispered. You wanted me to die quietly. I pressed the key. The screen flashed red, indicating the command was armed and ready for deployment. I am going to survive, son. But by the time I am done with you, you are going to wish you were the one in the clinic. I leaned back in the chair. I felt a strange sense of peace. The grief was gone. The hesitation was gone. All that was left was the mission. I was going to save my daughter. I was going to save her by burning down the prison she had built for herself. She would hate me for it. She might never speak to me again, but she would be free. And she would be debt-free. Because when the dust settled, the only king standing would be Reginald. If you have ever had to make a decision that broke your heart but saved your soul, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. It is a lonely place to be. But someone has to stand on the wall. Someone has to hold the line. Join me in the next part. The wedding is about to begin. And I promise you it is going to be an event that makes the red wedding look like a tea party. Don't forget to subscribe. You do not want to miss the fireworks. The sun rose on the day before the wedding with a brilliance that felt mocking. The sky over Manhattan was a piercing, cloudless blue, the kind of weather that makes you believe anything is possible. For Chase Sterling, it was supposed to be the day he ascended to the throne. He was scheduled to give a keynote presentation at noon, unveiling the Sterling Smart Node, a piece of technology that I knew for a fact was nothing more than a plastic box with a blinking LED light inside. But the market did not know that. The investors did not know that. And my daughter, who was currently at the venue overseeing the flower arrangement, certainly did not know that. I sat in my command center in Queens nursing a mug of black coffee. The caffeine was the only thing keeping me going. I had not slept in 24 hours. My eyes were gritty, but my mind was razor sharp. On my screens, the financial pulse of Sterling Energy was beating erratically. I could see the pre-launch hype driving up the valuation. I could see the influx of capital from unsuspecting retail investors who bought into his charm. But I was looking at something else. I was looking at the hidden ledger, the one Chase thought was encrypted. "It is time to shake the tree," I said into my headset. Dante was on the other end, sitting in his office in Midtown, looking every inch the corporate executioner. "Copy that, Reggie. Making the call now." I switched the audio feed to Chase's office. He was standing in front of a full-length mirror practicing his speech. He adjusted his tie, flashed a winning smile at his reflection, and pointed finger guns at himself. "You are a golden god, Chase," he whispered to himself. "You are the next Elon." His phone rang. He frowned, checking the caller ID. It was Dante. Chase cleared his throat, put on his best CEO voice, and answered. "Dante. My man, I hope you are calling to wish me luck on the launch. We are tracking for a record opening." "Not exactly." Chase Dante's voice cut through the air, cool and devoid of warmth. "I am calling to inform you that the Onyx board has authorized a spot audit." Chase froze. His smile evaporated. "A what?" "A spot audit," Dante repeated. "It is standard procedure for all our portfolio companies prior to a public offering or a major product launch. We just need to verify the liquidity of the operational accounts and cross-reference the burn rate with the invoices. My team will be there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes, Chase's voice cracked. He sounded like a teenager caught with cigarettes. Dante, look, today is insane. I have the keynote. I have the wedding rehearsal dinner tonight. Can't we do this next week? After the honeymoon. I am afraid not, Dante said. The board is nervous about the market volatility. We need to see the books today. If everything is in order, it will take an hour. If not, well, let's just hope everything is in order. See you in 20 minutes. The line went dead. I leaned forward, watching the monitor. This was the moment of truth. This was the stress test. Chase stood paralyzed for a moment. Then pure, unadulterated panic set in. He rushed to his desk, nearly tripping over his own chair. He woke up his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a clumsiness born of terror. I mirrored his screen on my main monitor. I could see exactly what he was doing. He was logging into the corporate bank accounts. Oh God, oh God, oh God, Chase muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. He pulled up the main operating account. The balance was dangerously low. He had $12 million from me just weeks ago. Where did it go? I watched as he frantically clicked through the transaction history. And there it was. The autopsy of a narcissist. $3 million transferred to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, a gambling debt he had been hiding. $2 million for the down payment on a penthouse that he claimed to already own. And then a transaction that made my stomach turn. $500,000 to Tiffany & Company. I zoomed in on the receipt. It was dated 3 days ago. A yellow diamond necklace. My heart stopped for a second. Was it for Maya, a wedding gift? Then I saw the delivery address. It was not our address. It was not Maya's apartment. It was a condo in Soho. I quickly ran a search on the address. It belonged to a woman named Chloe Vane, his former assistant, the one he had supposedly fired for incompetence last year. He was buying $500,000 jewelry for his mistress with my money while telling my daughter they couldn't afford to help her sick father. The rage that surged through me was cold and absolute, but I forced myself to stay focused. The audit team was 18 minutes away. Chase had a $500,000 hole in the account that he couldn't explain. If the auditors saw that money missing without a corresponding invoice, they would flag it as embezzlement. He needed to fill the hole. He needed cash. Fast. I watched him open another window. He logged into the employee payroll system. "Don't do it, son," I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me. "Do not cross that line." Sterling Energy had 40 employees: engineers, coders, receptionists, people with families, people with mortgages. The payroll fund held exactly $600,000 meant to cover salaries for the next month. It was sacred money. In the corporate world, you can mess with a lot of things, but you never ever touch the payroll. Chase stared at the screen. He looked at the door. He looked back at the screen. "I will put it back," he muttered, his hands trembling. "Once the stock pops tomorrow, I will put it back double. No one will know." He highlighted the entire balance of the payroll account. He initiated a transfer to the general operating fund. My system flashed a warning. "Suspicious activity detected." Chase clicked confirm. The screen processed. "Transfer complete." He let out a long, ragged breath. He slumped back in his chair, wiping the sweat from his brow with his silk sleeve. He thought he had saved himself. He thought he had just moved numbers around to balance a spreadsheet. He didn't realize he had just stepped onto a landmine. On my desk, a red light began to blink. It was the notification I had coded myself. The trigger for Appendix 17. The contract with Onyx Ventures was specific. Any unauthorized transfer of restricted funds, specifically including employee payroll or tax withholdings, constitutes a severe material breach. This breach did not just allow us to pull our funding, it allowed us to accelerate the debt. It meant the entire $12 million plus penalties was due immediately. Not next month, not next week, immediately. And because he had signed the personal guarantee, it meant his personal assets were now forfeit. I picked up the phone. "Dante," I said. "He did it. He raided the payroll. We have him," Dante asked. "We have him," I confirmed. "But do not stop the audit. Go in there. Let him sweat. Let him lie to your face. I want the auditors to document the transfer. I want a paper trail so thick he can never claw his way out of it." "Understood," Dante said. "And the clause, do we trigger it now?" "No," I said, watching Chase straighten his tie, composing himself for the arrival of the wolves. "Not yet. We wait for the wedding. I want him to walk down that aisle thinking he got away with it. I want him to look at my daughter and think he fooled her, because when I take him down, I want the fall to be from the highest possible height." I hung up. I looked at the screen one last time. Chase was now practicing his smile again, convinced he was a genius who had just pulled a fast one on the universe. "You stole from your workers, Chase," I said to his digital ghost. "You stole from the people who built your lie. And you bought a diamond for another woman while preparing to marry my daughter." I stood up and walked out of the server room. I went into my bedroom and pulled the bespoke tuxedo out of the garment bag. It was black, sharp, and timeless. I ran my hand over the lapel. I had planned to be a guest at this wedding. I had planned to sit in the back row and be the quiet, embarrassing father. But plans change. I was not going as a guest anymore. I was going as the CEO of Onyx Ventures. I was going as the owner of Sterling Energy. And I was going as a father who was about to burn the world down to save his child. I checked my watch. The helicopter was scheduled for tomorrow morning. "Sleep well, Chase," I whispered, "because this is the last night of restful sleep you are going to have for a very, very long time. If you are on the edge of your seat waiting to see how this audit plays out and the chaos that is about to unfold at the wedding, make sure you have hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss the finale. And tell me in the comments, do you think Maya suspects anything about the mistress, or is she truly blind to who he is? I read every theory. Let's get ready for the main event." The helicopter blades sliced through the morning air with a rhythmic thumping sound that matched the beating of my heart. I looked down from 5,000 feet at the cliffside resort. It was a sprawling palace of white stone and glass perched on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. From this height, the guests looked like ants scurrying around a pile of sugar. But they were not ants. They were the elite. They were the sharks, the influencers, and the parasites of high society that Chase Sterling had summoned to witness his coronation. I adjusted the cuffs of my tuxedo. It was a bespoke piece tailored on Savile Row in London 10 years ago, made of midnight blue wool that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. It fit me like a suit of armor. For the first time in decades, I was not wearing the disguise of Reginald the retired electrician. Today, I was wearing the uniform of Reginald King, the silent titan of industry. Dante sat across from me in the helicopter cabin. He was checking his tablet, monitoring the live feed from the resort. "The press is all there," Dante shouted over the noise of the rotors. CNN, CNBC, even the tech blogs. Chase really went all out. Really went all. He has set up a red carpet at the entrance to the chapel. He is treating this like the Oscars. Good, I said, looking out the window. The bigger the stage, the harder the fall. Is the security team in place? Dante nodded. Titan Security is running the perimeter. You know who owns Titan, right? I smiled, a rare cold smile. Big Mike. I wired the electrical system for his first office in the Bronx back in '92 when he could not afford to pay a union contractor. He owes me. We are cleared for landing on the private pad, Dante said. But the main gate is going to be a problem. Chase has given them a specific blacklist with your photo on top. He has instructed them to use force if necessary. Let them try, I said. The helicopter touched down on the private helipad a mile from the main resort entrance. I stepped out the wind whipping my coat. I did not take the shuttle bus. I wanted to walk. I needed to walk. I needed to feel the ground beneath my feet before I pulled it out from under everyone else. I walked toward the main entrance of the cliffside. It was a massive archway draped in thousands of white orchids. I did the math in my head. Those flowers alone cost more than my first house. As I approached the gate, I saw the security checkpoint. It was fortified like a military base but disguised with silk ribbons. 3 guards stood there, massive men in black suits with earpieces. They were checking invitations and scanning QR codes. I walked straight up the middle lane. I was not holding an invitation. I was holding nothing but my resolve. One of the guards, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, stepped in my path. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my face. He recognized me. Chase had done a good job briefing them. Hold it right there, the guard rumbled, crossing his arms. You must be the father. Mr. Sterling said you might try to crash the party. I am not crashing, I said, my voice calm and steady. I am arriving. The guard laughed. It was a dismissive sound. Look, Pops, I do not want to hurt you, but I have strict orders. No invitation, no entry. And you are definitely not on the list. In fact, you are on the do not admit list, so turn around and walk away before I have to drag you away. Behind me, a line of limousines was waiting. People were rolling down their windows to watch the drama. I could see the cameras flashing. This was exactly what Chase wanted, the unruly father being tossed out like trash. I reached into the inner pocket of my tuxedo. The guard tensed his hand, moving toward his belt. Don't try anything stupid, old man. I pulled out a small, sleek card. It was not a credit card. It was made of black titanium, heavy and cold. It had no numbers on it, just a single logo etched in silver, a lightning bolt inside a shield, the emblem of Titan Security's founding board members. I held it up to the guard's face. I suggest you scan this, I said softly. Or call Big Mike and tell him you just stopped Reginald King at the door. The guard hesitated. He looked at the card, then at me. He had probably never seen one before, but he knew the rumors. He pulled out his scanner and beeped the chip embedded in the titanium. His device let out a sharp, unique chime. A green light flashed, followed by the words, Priority 1, Founder Access. The color drained from the guard's face. He looked at the device, then back at me, his eyes widening in terror. He tapped his earpiece, his hand trembling slightly. Command, this is Gate 1. We have a code black. Code black. The voice on the radio crackled loud enough for me to hear. Who is it? It is Mr. King, the guard stammered. The Mr. King. There was a long silence on the radio. Then a voice I recognized, the voice of the shift commander, barked out. Open the gate. Open it now, and give him an escort. Do not touch him. Do not even breathe on him wrong. The guard lowered his arm. He stepped aside, bowing his head slightly. I am so sorry, sir. I did not know. Mr. Sterling told us you were just... Mr. Sterling talks a lot, I interrupted, pocketing the card. That is his problem. I walked past him. I did not look back. I entered the resort grounds. The transformation was immediate. The noise of the outside world vanished, replaced by the soft strains of a string quartet playing somewhere in the distance. The lawn was manicured to perfection. Waiters in white gloves were circulating with trays of champagne. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And it was all a lie. I moved through the crowd. I was a ghost in their machine. No one stopped me now. The security detail was trailing 5 steps behind me, ensuring no one got in my way. I was no longer the uninvited guest. I was the VIP they had not planned for. I saw the press pit. Dozens of photographers were jostling for position near the entrance to the ballroom. They were waiting for the groom, and there he was. Chase was standing on the grand staircase posing for photos. He looked impeccable in a white tuxedo, his teeth gleaming, his hair perfectly coiffed. He was laughing, holding a glass of scotch, looking every bit the master of the universe. Next to him stood Maya. My breath caught in my throat. She looked stunning in her wedding dress, a flowing gown of lace and silk. But she looked small. She looked like a doll that had been posed for a picture. Her smile was tight. Her eyes were scanning the crowd, looking for something. Was she looking for me, or was she looking for a way out? I stepped into the shadow of a large pillar. I wanted to watch them for a moment. "So this is the big day," Chase said loudly to a reporter from TechCrunch who was thrusting a microphone in his face. "It is not just a wedding. It is a merger. A merger of love and innovation. Sterling Energy is about to change the world, and Maya here, well, she is my anchor." Maya flinched slightly at the word anchor. "And what about the rumors of financial instability?" the reporter asked. "Some sources say the burn rate is too high." Chase laughed, waving his hand dismissively. "Haters. That is all it is. We just secured a massive partnership with Onyx Ventures. Does that sound like instability to you? We are flush. We are liquid. Today is about celebration, not spreadsheets." I checked my watch. It was 11:55. The ceremony was scheduled to start at noon. The audit team had just finished their work at his office. Dante sent me a single vibration on my wrist. Audit complete. Discrepancies confirmed. The trap is armed. I stepped out from behind the pillar. I adjusted my tie one last time. I walked toward the red carpet. The security guards at the base of the stairs saw me coming. They looked at Chase, then at me. They did not move to stop me. They had their new orders. Chase saw movement in his peripheral vision. He turned a smile, ready for another camera. But when he saw me, the smile died. He blinked. He looked confused. He looked at my suit. He looked at the way I walked, not with the shuffle of an old man, but with the stride of a predator. "What the hell?" Chase muttered, his voice picked up by the nearby microphones. "Security, get him out of here." The guards did not move. Chase's face turned red. I said, "Get him out. He is trespassing." I kept walking until I was at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at him. The cameras turned toward me. The reporters sensed the tension. They smelled blood. "Hello, Chase," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried across the silent lawn. Reginald Chase hissed, stepping down one step. He looked furious, but also confused. "Where did you get that suit? Did you rent it?" "Look, I told you. You are not welcome here. Go back to your diner." "I am not here for the wedding, Chase," I said, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out a document. It was not a gift. It was a blue folder with the Onyx Ventures seal embossed on the front. "I am here as a representative of your primary investor," I said loud enough for the press to hear. "And I am afraid we have a problem with the accounts." Chase laughed nervously, glancing at the reporters. This is a joke, right? Maya, did you put him up to this? Is this some kind of senile prank?" Maya was staring at me. Her eyes were wide. She was looking at the suit. She was looking at the way I held myself. She realized in that moment that she was looking at a stranger. "It is no prank, son," I said, taking the first step up the stairs. The security guards parted like the Red Sea. I walked up until I was standing eye level with him. Up close, I could smell the fear coming off him. It smelled like sweat and expensive cologne. "You claimed you were liquid," I said, holding up the folder. "But my auditor's telling me you raided the employee payroll fund this morning to cover a gambling debt. That is a felony, Chase. And it is a breach of contract." Chase turned pale. Who are you?" "How do you know that I leaned in close?" The microphones leaned in with me. "I know because I am the one who signed the check," I whispered, but the silence was so deep that everyone heard it. "I am Onyx Ventures." The flashbulbs erupted. The crowd gasped. Chase stumbled back as if he had been shot. I turned to Maya. She was trembling. "Daddy," she whispered. I looked at her. I did not smile. "I told you I would pay for the wedding, baby," I said softly. "But I did not say I would pay for the groom." I turned back to Chase. "You have two choices, Chase. You can walk away now with nothing but the clothes on your back. Or you can stay, and I will have the police arrest you in front of the Rolling Stone photographer." Chase looked around wildly. He looked at the press. He looked at his wealthy friends. He looked at the security guards who were now staring at him with contempt. "This is insane," Chase screamed. "You are a broke electrician. You fixed my toaster. I fixed the grid that powers this city." I roared, my voice finally breaking the calm facade. "And right now, I am cutting your power." I snapped my fingers. Dante stepped out from the crowd. He was holding a tablet. "Accounts frozen," Dante announced. "All company cards declined. The repo team is at the gate for the Ferrari, and the yacht captain just called he is turning the boat around." Chase looked at his phone. It was buzzing with notifications. Bank alerts, insufficient funds, asset seizures. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You ruined everything." "No," I said, straightening my cuffs. "I just turned on the lights. And cockroaches hate the light." I looked at the crowd. "The wedding is canceled," I announced. "But the open bar is already paid for by me, so please enjoy the drinks." I turned to Maya. She was standing there, the bouquet hanging limply in her hand. "Maya," I said, "we need to talk." But before she could answer, Chase lunged. He lost all control. He screamed like a banshee and threw a punch at my face. It was a slow, clumsy punch born of desperation. I did not even have to dodge. The security guard, the one who had stopped me at the gate, intercepted it. He grabbed Chase's arm and twisted it behind his back in one fluid motion. "Get off me," Chase screamed. "Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," the guard said, forcing him to his knees. "You are the guy who owes Mr. King a lot of money." I looked down at him. He was on his knees in his white tuxedo, now stained with grass. "Lesson number 1. Chase," I said, looking down at him. "Never underestimate a man just because he works with his hands. Those hands built the world you live in." I turned to the press cameras. "If anyone wants the full story," I said, "contact my attorney." Then I offered my arm to my daughter. Maya looked at Chase, kneeling in the dirt. Then she looked at me. She looked at the man who had sold his piano for her. She looked at the man who had been humiliated for her. She dropped the bouquet. It hit the ground with a soft thud. She took my arm. "Let's go, Dad," she whispered. We walked down the stairs together, leaving the chaos behind us. But the story was not over. The hardest part was just beginning. If you want to see what happened in the limo ride home and the shocking confession Maya made to me, you need to subscribe right now. This was just the explosion. Now comes the fallout. And trust me, the debris is going to hit everyone. The chapel was an architectural marvel of glass and steel perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the churning Atlantic Ocean. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the 300 guests who sat in uncomfortable silence. The air inside was thick, not with romance, but with the suffocating tension of a bomb that had been armed, but had not yet detonated. I stood at the back of the room, my hands clasped behind my back. Chase had managed to scramble inside after the confrontation on the stairs, desperate to rush through the ceremony before reality could catch up to him. He was standing at the altar, sweating profusely, his white tuxedo jacket stained with a smudge of dirt from where the security guard had pinned him. He was whispering frantically to Maya, likely telling her that I was crazy, that I was jealous, that everything was under control. Maya looked pale. She was holding her bouquet so tightly that the stems were snapping. She kept glancing over her shoulder, looking for me. The minister, a man with a booming voice who had probably been paid triple his usual fee to ignore the obvious distress of the groom, cleared his throat. He opened his book. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice echoing off the glass walls, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." I watched Chase. He was tapping his foot. He was not looking at his bride. He was looking at the exit signs. He was looking at his phone, which he had slipped into his pocket but kept vibrating against his leg. The minister droned on about love, commitment, and honesty. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Honesty. The man standing at the altar had lied about his name, his fortune, and his heart. Then came the moment every dramatic movie relies on but rarely happens in real life. The minister looked out at the congregation. "If anyone here can show just cause why these two should not be legally joined, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the waves crashing against the rocks hundreds of feet below. You could hear the rustle of silk dresses. Chase let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing. He thought he had made it. He thought the social pressure was too high for anyone to cause a scene. I took a step forward. My dress shoes clicked sharply on the marble floor. "I object," I said. My voice was not loud. It was not a scream. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the calm precision of an engineer reading a voltage meter. 300 heads turned simultaneously. Chase spun around. His eyes bulged. The veins in his neck popped out. He looked like a cornered rat. "Oh, for God's sake," Chase shouted, his voice cracking. "Someone get this lunatic out of here. Where is security? Where are the guards?" He pointed a trembling finger at me. "He is senile. He is off his meds. He is trying to ruin my day because he is jealous that I have more money in my pocket than he earned in a lifetime." I did not stop walking. I walked down the center aisle, the guests parting away from me as if I were radioactive. I saw faces I recognized. Bankers, tech CEOs, people who Chase had charmed with lies. They were looking at me with confusion, and then as I got closer, with recognition. They saw the bespoke suit. They saw the way I carried myself. They realized that the poor electrician story didn't match the man walking toward the altar. Security Chase screamed again. "Get this beggar out of my sight." The security guards stood by the doors, their arms crossed. They were Titan security. They answered to Big Mike, and Big Mike answered to me. They did not move a muscle. I reached the front of the altar. I climbed the 3 small steps until I was standing on the same level as the bride and groom. Maya looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, please," she whispered, "just go. Don't do this." I looked at her gently. "I am doing this for you, baby. One day you will thank me." Then I turned to Chase. He was backing away, shielding himself behind the best man. "You want to know why I object?" I asked, reaching over and taking the microphone from the stunned minister's hand. I turned to face the crowd. "I do not object to the concept of marriage," I said, my voice amplified through the high-end sound system. "I do not object to love. But I object to fraud. I object to theft. And I object to a man using my money to pay for a wedding to my daughter while wishing for my death." Chase laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Your money, you delusional old fool. You have $5,000 in a savings account. I have millions. I have Onyx Ventures backing me." "Ah, yes," I said, smiling coldly. "Onyx Ventures, the mysterious savior that gave you $12 million 3 weeks ago." I snapped my fingers. At the back of the chapel, the heavy double doors swung open. Dante walked in. He was not alone. 2 men in dark suits pushed a cart carrying a high-lumen projector. Dante plugged a cable into the venue's video system. "Chase," I said, pointing to the massive white wall behind the altar. "Do you recognize these figures?" The wall lit up. It was not a slideshow of romantic photos. It was a high-definition projection of a bank statement. The crowd gasped. "This is the operating account for Sterling Energy One," narrated, walking the audience through the crime scene. As of this morning, the balance was nearly 0. But wait, let's look at where the money went. The slide changed. $3 million to an offshore gambling site, I read. $2 million for a personal penthouse. And this is my favorite. The slide changed to the receipt from Tiffany & Company. $500,000 for a yellow diamond necklace delivered to Miss Chloe Vane in Soho, I said. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Maya gasped. She looked at Chase. "Chloe." Your assistant Chase was shaking his head violently. No, it is fake. He doctored the photos. He is a hacker." And finally, I continued, ignoring him. The timestamp showed 8:45 a.m. this morning, a transfer of $600,000, the entire employee payroll fund, stolen to cover up the gambling debts before an audit. I turned to the guests. This man is not a CEO. He is a thief. He is standing here in a tuxedo paid for with stolen money, preparing to marry a woman he is cheating on while his employees are about to find out their paychecks have bounced. Chase lunged at me. "You lie. You have no proof. Who are you to question Onyx Ventures? I will call the board. I will have you destroyed." "Call them," I challenged, holding out my phone. "Call the chairman of Onyx Ventures right now." Chase froze. He looked at the phone. He looked at me. "You don't know the number, do you?" I asked softly. "You never met the chairman. You only met Dante. You signed the contract without reading the fine print. You were so arrogant, so sure of your own genius that you didn't even check who was signing the checks." I took a step closer to him. The microphone picked up my whisper. "Turn around, Chase. Look at the screen." Dante hit the next slide. It was the incorporation document for Onyx Ventures. It was a standard legal form boring to most, but at the bottom highlighted in red was the name of the sole proprietor and managing director, Reginald King. The room went dead silent. Chase stared at the screen, his mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He read the name. He looked at me. He looked back at the name. "No," he whispered. That is impossible. You fix wires. You drive a Ford." "I built the wires." I corrected him, my voice thundering now. "I hold the patents that run the grid you pretend to disrupt. I am Onyx Ventures Chase. I am the one who gave you the $12 million, and I am the one invoking Appendix 17. Chase stumbled back, tripping over the train of Maya's dress. Appendix 17. The breach of contract clause, I explained mercilessly. It states that in the event of financial malfeasance, like stealing payroll, the primary investor has the right to immediate seizure of all company and personal assets. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. This is a seizure order signed by a judge 10 minutes ago. I own your company, Chase. I own your intellectual property. I own your penthouse. I own your car. I even own the tuxedo you were wearing because you paid for it with the corporate credit card. Maya stepped away from him. She looked at the screen, then at me. Her hands were covering her mouth. The realization was washing over her. The father she had called small, the father she had dismissed as a failure, was the titan who had secretly held up her world. Chase looked around the room. The guests were standing up now. Phones were out. Live streams were running. The TechCrunch reporter was typing furiously on his laptop. You set me up," Chase screamed, tears of rage mixing with the sweat on his face. "You tricked me." "This is entrapment. I did not trick you," I said calmly. "I gave you a rope made of money. I wanted to see if you would use it to climb or if you would use it to hang yourself. I looked at the projection of the payroll theft one last time. You chose the noose son." Chase turned to Maya. He grabbed her hand. "Maya, baby, listen to me. He is lying. He is a monster. We can fix this. We just need to get married. Once we are married, his assets are marital property. We can sue him." I watched my daughter. This was the final test. The truth was out. The money was gone. The glamour was stripped away. All that was left was a desperate man begging her to help him steal from her own father. Maya looked at his hand gripping her wrist. She looked at the bruise forming there. She pulled her hand away violently. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "Chase, please," I said, gesturing to the back of the room where 2 police officers had just entered, flanked by Dante. "The show is over." Chase looked at the police. He looked at the exit. He looked at the cliff. For a second I thought he might jump. But men like Chase are cowards. They don't jump. They beg. He fell to his knees. Not to me. To Maya. "Maya, please, I have nowhere to go. They took my apartment keys. They took my car. Help me." I stood over him. The shadow of the poor black electrician cast a long darkness over the white tuxedo of the fraud. "You called me a broke old man, Chase," I said, looking down at him with pity, not hate. "But look at you now. You are kneeling in a church, bankrupt, friendless, and about to go to prison." I leaned down and whispered one last thing in his ear, something the microphone didn't catch, but the camera saw the color drain from his face. Nature just took its course. I stood up and nodded to the police officers. They moved in. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was louder than any wedding bell. But the drama wasn't over. As they dragged him away, screaming obscenities, I turned to my daughter. She was standing alone at the altar, a bride without a groom, a daughter who had betrayed her father. The room waited. Would I hug her? Would I scold her? I did neither. I simply held out my hand. The hand that had signed the checks. The hand that had held the soldering iron. The hand she had been too ashamed to hold in public. "It is time to go home, Maya," I said. She looked at my hand. And then she did something that surprised even me. If you want to know how Maya reacted and the heartbreaking confession she made in the car that changed our relationship forever, make sure you are subscribed. The wedding is over, but the reckoning has just begun. Leave a comment below. Do you think I was too hard on him, or did he get exactly what he deserved? I will see you in the next part. The silence in the chapel was heavy enough to crush a man. 300 people were staring at the screen where my name, Reginald King, glowed in high-definition red letters as the owner of Onyx Ventures. But the person staring the hardest was Chase Sterling. He looked as if gravity had suddenly shifted, leaving him floating in a void where his rules no longer applied. His face, usually flushed with the confidence of a man who has never heard the word no, was now the color of old ash. His mouth opened and closed, but for a long moment, no sound came out. He was a fish on a hook thrashing against the inevitable. Then the denial set in. It was violent and ugly. No Chase screamed, the sound tearing through the elegant room like a jagged knife. This is a lie. This is a deep fake. It has to be. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his other hand clutching the altar railing for support. Look at him. Look at his hands. He is a broke electrician. He fixes toasters. He changes light bulbs in basements. He is not a venture capitalist. He is the help. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Chase was revealing his true face, the face of a man who believed that worth was determined by the softness of your hands, not the content of your character. I stood my ground, calm and immovable as a mountain. I let his insults wash over me. I let everyone hear them. I let the press record every venomous word. Yes, Chase, I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. I am an electrician. I have spent 40 years climbing poles in ice storms. I have spent thousands of hours in tunnels full of rats and high-voltage cables. My hands are rough because they built something real. I took a step closer to him. He shrank back, terrified of the truth walking toward him. You call me a Sparky? I continued, addressing the room as much as him. You think electricity is magic. You flip a switch and the light comes on. You plug in your server and your app works. You think it just happens. But it does not just happen. Men like me make it happen. We design the load. We balance the grid. We ensure that when parasites like you want to drain power for your vanity projects, the whole city does not go dark. I pointed to the projector screen behind me. You are renting servers to run your stolen code Chase. And who do you think designed the cooling systems for that data center? Who holds the patent on the smart grid protocol that allows your company to even exist? I tapped my chest. Me, the broke electrician. I do not just fix the lights, son. I own the switch. And right now, I am turning you off. Chase looked around wildly, seeking an ally. He looked at the bankers in the front row. They were avoiding his gaze, already mentally erasing his number from their phones. He looked at his groomsmen. They were stepping back, distancing themselves from the blast radius. Then he looked at Maya. Maya, baby, he pleaded, his voice cracking into a sob. You know me. You know I love you. He is trying to humiliate us. He is jealous of our love. He wants to destroy your happiness because he is miserable alone. Don't listen to him. We can walk out of here. We can go to the courthouse. Maya looked at him. Her eyes were swimming with confusion and pain. She wanted to believe him. I could see it. The human heart is a stubborn thing. It holds on to hope even when the evidence is screaming in its face. She looked at me, begging silently for me to stop, for this to be a nightmare she could wake up from. I looked at my daughter. I loved her enough to hurt her one last time. I loved her enough to break her heart so he couldn't kill her spirit. I am sorry, Maya, I said softly, but you need to see the whole picture. You need to see who he is when he thinks no one is watching. I nodded to Dante. Dante tapped the tablet. The screen behind the altar changed again. Gone were the bank statements. In their place was a video window. It was the footage from the yacht. The date stamp in this corner showed it was from 3 nights ago. The audio was crystal clear, amplified by the church's expensive sound system. The video started. The bass of the dance music thumped through the chapel floor. Chase appeared on screen holding the bottle of Cristal, his face twisted in a drunken sneer. The entire room watched. Maya watched. On the screen, Chase took a drag from his cigar and leaned into the hidden camera. Maya is useful, the digital, Chase said, his voice echoing off the stained glass windows. She looks great in photos. She has that whole educated, supportive partner vibe that investors love. In the chapel, Maya flinched as if she had been slapped. Her hand went to her throat. The video continued. Once the company goes public next year, I cash out the on-screen, Chase bragged. Then I file for divorce. I will give her a nice settlement to keep her quiet. Maybe buy her a condo in Jersey so she is far away. But I cannot be married to her long term. She is too clingy. A collective gasp went through the audience. Someone in the back row murmured, oh my God. But the video was not done. It was time for the final dagger, and her father, the video. Chase laughed. The electrical dinosaur, I am hoping nature takes its course with him. The guy is 73. Hopefully his heart gives out soon and saves me the trouble of banning him from my house. He is a stain on my brand. The video froze on that image, Chase laughing, wishing for my death, calling my daughter a clingy prop. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of death. It was the sound of a woman's soul shattering into a million jagged pieces. Maya stood frozen at the altar. She was staring at the screen, her eyes wide unblinking. Her face was completely drained of blood. She looked like a marble statue of grief. Chase scrambled toward the projector, waving his arms as if he could physically block the image. "Turn it off!" he screamed. "Turn it off!" "That is out of context. That was just locker room talk. I was drunk. I didn't mean it." He turned to Maya, reaching for her hands. His hands were sweating, shaking. "Maya, please. You know how it is with the guys. We just talk trash. I didn't mean a word of it. I love you. You are my soulmate." Maya did not move. She did not blink. She just stared at him as he grabbed her arms, shaking her slightly. "Baby, say something." Chase begged. "Tell them they are crazy. Tell them we are stronger than this." I stepped forward to intervene to pull him off her, but I stopped. I saw something in Maya's eyes, a spark, a tiny, fierce spark igniting in the ashes of her dreams. She looked down at his hands clutching her silk sleeves, the same hands that had signed the stolen checks, the same hands that had held the champagne while he mocked her. She looked up at his face. For the first time, she did not see the visionary. She did not see the CEO. She saw the small, frightened, cruel man hiding behind the mask. She pulled her arms away. The movement was slow, deliberate, and final. Chase stumbled back. "Maya," he whispered. Maya looked at the screen one last time at the image of the man she thought she was marrying, laughing about divorcing her. Then she looked at the real Chase. "You called me an asset," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the silent church it sounded like a cannon shot. Chase stammered. No, I said you were an asset to my life. Because I value you, you called me clingy." She continued, her voice gaining strength. "You said you would buy me a condo to keep me far away. You planned to divorce me before we even said I do. Maya, listen. And my father," she interrupted, tears finally spilling over hot and fast. "You wished for him to die. The man who raised me. The man who—" She choked on a sob. She looked at me. She saw the bespoke suit. She saw the power. But mostly she saw the protection. She realized that everything I had done, the poverty, the tests, the confrontation, it was all a shield. I had thrown myself in front of the bullet to save her. "You wished for him to die because he embarrassed your brand," Maya said, her voice shaking with rage. She reached up to her hair. She pulled out the diamond-encrusted veil, a piece of fabric that cost more than my car. She looked at it with disgust. "You are not a brand, Chase," she said. "You are a disease." She threw the veil at his feet. Chase looked at the heap of white tulle on the floor. He looked up, panic consuming him. "Maya, do not do this. Think about the press. Think about the investors." "I am thinking about the investors," Maya said coldly. She turned to the crowd. She found the camera crew from TechCrunch. She looked straight into the lens. "My name is Maya King," she announced, her voice ringing clear and true. "And I am officially announcing that this merger is canceled due to a lack of integrity on the part of the groom." Then she did something that made me prouder than any degree or promotion she had ever earned. She turned to Chase, raised her hand, and delivered a slap that echoed through the vaulted ceiling like a thunderclap. It was a slap for the lies, a slap for the theft, a slap for the disrespect. "Get out of my way," she said. Chase held his cheek, stunned. Maya turned to me. She did not run into my arms. She stood tall. She looked at me with a mixture of shame and gratitude. "Dad," she said softly, "take me home." I nodded. I offered her my arm. But Chase was not done. He was cornered. He was ruined. And a rat is most dangerous when it has no escape. "You cannot leave," he screamed, his face contorting into ugly, twisted lines. "You owe me. I made you famous. Without me, you are nobody. You are just the daughter of a broke old loser." He lunged at her, his hand raised, his eyes wild with violence. I did not need security this time. I stepped in front of my daughter. I caught his wrist in midair. My grip was iron. My forearms, built from 40 years of pulling cable, were stronger than any gym-sculpted muscle he had. I twisted his arm. He yelped, dropping to his knees. I leaned down, bringing my face inches from his. "I am not a loser, Chase," I whispered, my voice a low growl that only he could hear. "I am the man who just bought your life for pennies on the dollar." I shoved him back. He fell onto the altar steps right next to the discarded veil. I straightened my jacket. I looked at Dante and nodded. Dante signaled the police officers. As Maya and I began to walk down the aisle, the officers moved in. Chase began to scream as they handcuffed him, shouting about lawyers and lawsuits, but his voice was getting fainter as he was dragged out the side door. The guests parted for us in silence. But this time, it was not the silence of judgment, it was the silence of respect. They looked at me, the electrician in the bespoke suit, and they nodded. They looked at Maya, the bride who had walked away from a fortune to save her soul, and they lowered their eyes in deference. We walked out of the chapel and into the bright sunlight. The ocean breeze hit our faces. It felt clean. It felt like freedom. Maya took a deep breath. She looked at the helicopter waiting on the pad. "You own a helicopter?" she asked, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "I rented it," I admitted. "But the company that owns it, I might buy it next week." Maya laughed. It was a watery, broken sound, but it was real. I helped her into the limousine that was waiting. I sat beside her. As the door closed, shutting out the world, the cameras, and the wreckage of the wedding, Maya collapsed against my shoulder. She cried. She cried for the man she thought she loved. She cried for the time she had wasted. But as I held her, stroking her hair like I did when she was a child, I knew these were healing tears. The poison was out. The fever had broken. We sat in silence as the car pulled away. But I knew the hardest conversation was yet to come. She had seen my power. Now she needed to understand my deception. "Dad," she whispered into my coat. "Yes, baby. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me treat you like that?" I looked out the window at the passing cliffs. "Because, Maya," I said softly, "you cannot teach a person to see the truth by explaining it. You have to let them walk through the dark until they find the light switch themselves. If you want to know what happened next and how we rebuilt our relationship from the ashes of that day, you need to stay tuned. The wedding is over, but the business of being a family is just beginning. And Chasewell Prison has a very different kind of power grid." Let me know in the comments, would you have slapped him, or would you have let the police handle it? I think Maya made the right call. The silence in the chapel was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a vacuum just before the air rushes back in to cause an explosion. Chase was still on his knees, his white tuxedo pants stained with the dust of the floor he had just been dragged across. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and wet, pleading for a mercy that I did not have in stock. He still thought this was a negotiation. He still thought there was a way to talk himself out of the corner he had painted himself into. He opened his mouth to speak, to spin another web of lies, to blame a glitch or a misunderstanding, but I did not give him the chance. In my line of work, when you find a short circuit that threatens to burn down the building, you do not debate with it. You cut the power. Immediately, completely, irreversibly. I looked over at Dante, who was standing by the projector with the impassive face of a reaper. He was holding his tablet, his finger hovering over a single red button on the touchscreen. It was a digital kill switch. I had coded myself a command script that would execute a cascade of legal and financial protocols across 30 different banking systems simultaneously. "Execute it," I said. My voice was soft, barely a whisper, but in that acoustic glass box it sounded like a gavel striking wood. Dante tapped the screen. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The waves continued to crash against the cliffs outside. The guests continued to hold their breath. Chase let out a small, nervous laugh, thinking that perhaps my threats were empty, that I was just an old man playing with toys I did not understand. Nothing happened. Chase scoffed, scrambling to his feet, trying to regain a shred of his dignity. "See? He is bluffing. It is all smoke and mirrors." And then the sound began. It started with a single vibration, a buzz from the inside pocket of Chase's jacket, then another, then a chime, then a relentless rapid-fire series of notifications that sounded like a slot machine paying out a jackpot in reverse. Ding, ding, buzz, ding. Chase froze. His hand flew to his pocket. He pulled out his phone. The screen was lighting up with a terrifying strobe effect of banners and alerts. I watched him read them. I knew exactly what they said because I had written the triggers. Alert Chase Manhattan Bank. Account ending in 409. Status frozen by court order. Alert American Express Centurion. Transaction declined. Credit limit revoked. Alert E-Trade. Portfolio liquidation initiated. Margin call active. Chase's thumbs flew across the screen. He was trying to log into his banking app. I saw the color drain from his face as the biometric scanner rejected his Face ID. He tried his passcode. Access denied. "What are you doing?" Chase screamed, tapping the screen violently. "Why can't I get in?" "Because it is not your money anymore," I said calmly. "It never was. You were just holding it for me." I took a step closer to the edge of the altar. "The contract you signed, Chase. Appendix 17. It grants Onyx Ventures the power of attorney in the event of criminal fraud. 5 minutes ago, when we proved you stole the payroll, that clause activated. I didn't just freeze your accounts, I absorbed them." Chase looked up, his eyes wild. "You can't do that. That is illegal." "It is perfectly legal," I assured him. "It is aggressive, yes, but legal. You see, when you play with the big boys, you have to read the rules. And right now the rule is that every asset purchased with funds derived from Sterling Energy is now the property of the parent company." I pointed out the massive floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the resort's driveway. "Take a look outside, Chase." The guests turned their heads. Chase followed my gaze. Down below on the winding driveway that led to the resort entrance, a large flatbed truck was backing up. It was not a luxury vehicle. It was a dirty yellow tow truck with a flashing amber light bar. It stopped right next to the brand-new Ferrari SF90 Stradale that Chase had parked prominently at the front entrance, the car he had leased under the company name to show off his success. A man in a grease-stained jumpsuit jumped out of the truck. He didn't care about the wedding. He didn't care about the cameras. He was just doing his job. He hooked the chains onto the Ferrari's axle. No, Chase shrieked. He ran toward the window, pressing his hands against the glass like a prisoner. "That is my car." "That is a $500,000 car. You can't take that." "It is a company car, Chase," I said, my voice cutting through his panic, "and the company is reclaiming its inventory." We watched as the winch groaned. The Ferrari, the symbol of his arrogance, was dragged unceremoniously onto the flatbed. The bumper scraped against the asphalt with a sickening crunch. The sound was faint through the glass, but Chase flinched as if his own bones were breaking. Chase spun around to face the room. He looked at the bankers in the front row. These were men he had drank with, men he had promised millions to. "Bob," Steve Chase yelled, pointing at a venture capitalist from Goldman Sachs. "You know this is insane. Tell him this is a hostile takeover. Help me." Bob did not stand up. He did not offer a hand. He picked up his glass of champagne, took a sip, and deliberately looked away, checking his watch. In the world of finance, the smell of poverty is more repellent than the smell of death. Chase was radioactive now. Chase turned to his groomsmen, his college buddies, the guys who had laughed on the yacht about me dying. "Guys," Chase pleaded, "do something. Throw him out." The best man, a tall guy named Brad, who had been mocking my suit 10 minutes ago, took a step back. He took the boutonniere flower out of his lapel and dropped it on the floor. "Sorry, bro," Brad muttered. "I think I left my oven on." He turned and walked out the side door. The other groomsmen followed him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Chase was alone. He stood in the center of the altar, surrounded by the wreckage of his life. The phone in his hand was still vibrating, delivering the final death blows. Alert landlord. Notification. Lease agreement terminated due to non-payment. Eviction notice filed. He was homeless. Alert Tesla lease. Repossession order number 4492 dispatched. He was walking. Chase looked at the phone one last time and then he let it drop. It hit the marble floor and cracked. He didn't pick it up. He looked at his hands. The hands that had never done a day of hard labor in their life. He looked at me. The hate in his eyes was gone, replaced by a hollow, terrifying realization. "I have nothing," Chase whispered. His voice trembled. "I have absolutely nothing." "Correction," I said, walking down the steps until I was standing right in front of him. "You have debt." I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was a summary of the accounts. You owe $12 million to Onyx Ventures, I recited. You owe $600,000 to the employee payroll fund. You owe $500,000 to Tiffany's for a necklace you bought with stolen money. And you owe the IRS for 3 years of tax evasion that my auditors just uncovered. I folded the paper and tucked it into the pocket of his white tuxedo jacket. You are not just broke, son. You are in a hole so deep that light will not reach you for 20 years. Chase sank to his knees. This time it wasn't a performance. His legs simply gave out. He collapsed into a heap of white fabric and misery. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and realized he couldn't glue it back together. He looked up at Maya. She was standing by the exit watching him. Her face was tear-streaked, but her eyes were dry. She was seeing him clearly for the first time. She saw a man stripped of his props, stripped of his costumes, and she saw that there was nothing underneath. Chase reached a hand out to her. It was a pathetic gesture. "Maya," he croaked, "I can fix this. We can start over. I will get a job." Maya looked at him. She looked at the tow truck driving away with his Ferrari in the distance. She looked at me standing tall in my bespoke suit. "You can't get a job, Chase," she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. "You don't know how to work." She turned her back on him. Chase let out a sob that sounded like a wounded animal. He curled into a ball on the floor of the chapel. The guests watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. It was a public execution, but instead of a guillotine, we had used a spreadsheet. I looked down at him one last time. "I warned you, Chase," I said softly. "I told you that you were standing on my ground. I told you I was the market, and the market has just corrected you." I signaled to the back of the room. The police officers who had been waiting respectfully for the financial demolition to conclude stepped forward. They weren't here for the debt. They were here for the fraud. Chase didn't fight them this time. He didn't have the energy. He let them pull him to his feet. He let them cuff his hands behind his back. The sound of the metal ratcheting shut was the final period at the end of his sentence. As they led him away, he didn't look at the press. He didn't look at the bankers. He looked at the floor. I turned to the room. The guests were staring at me. They weren't looking at the waiter anymore. They were looking at a man who commanded the lightning. I adjusted my cuffs. "I apologize for the interruption," I said to the crowd, "but as I said, I refuse to let a thief steal my family's future. The bar is open. Please have a drink on Onyx Ventures." I walked toward the exit where Maya was waiting. She looked shattered, but she was standing. And as long as she was standing, we could rebuild. But as we walked out into the sunlight, leaving the ruins of Chase Sterling behind us, I knew that the hardest part wasn't destroying him. It was going to be healing her. If you thought watching his car get towed was satisfying, wait until you hear what he said to me as the police car drove him away. It was the final nail in his coffin. And if you are enjoying this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps me share these stories with the world. Let me know in the comments, do you think I went too far by taking everything? Or was it exactly what he deserved? I read every single comment. See you in the next part. The police officers hesitated for a moment, their handcuffs dangling like heavy steel pendulums. They were waiting for the final act of this tragedy to conclude. They knew, just as everyone in the room knew, that the legal battle was over, but the emotional war had one last casualty to claim. Chase Sterling was on his knees physically and metaphorically, but he was not a man who knew how to accept defeat with dignity. He was a creature of leverage, and he believed he still held one final card in his hand. My daughter. He crawled toward her. It was a grotesque sight. The white tuxedo, once pristine, was now scuffed with dirt and wrinkled with desperation. He reached out and grabbed the hem of Maya's wedding dress, clutching the expensive silk as if it were a lifeline that could pull him out of the abyss I had opened beneath him. "Maya, baby, look at me," Chase pleaded. His voice was a wet, ragged sound, devoid of the smooth baritone charm he used to woo investors. "Do not look at him. Look at me. We are a team. Remember, you and me against the world. We are the power couple." Maya stood frozen. Her face was pale, her makeup streaked with tears, but her eyes were dry now. She was looking down at him, but it was not with the adoration he was used to. It was with the clinical detachment of a scientist examining a specimen under a microscope. Chase mistook her silence for hesitation. He pressed harder, his voice rising in pitch, bordering on hysteria. "Your father is sick, Maya. He is mentally unstable. Look at what he did. He ruined our day. He ruined the most beautiful moment of our lives because he is jealous. He is a sad, lonely old man who cannot stand to see us shine." I stood a few feet away, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I did not move to intervene. I did not speak. I had fired my shot. I had revealed the truth. Now it was up to Maya to decide what she wanted to see. Did she want the comfortable lie or the painful truth? This was her crucible. Chase tugged at her dress again, harder this time. "Tell them." "Maya, tell the police to back off. Tell them, this is a misunderstanding. We are a team. We are going to build an empire. I did this for us. I took the money for us." "For us," Maya whispered. Her voice was soft, barely audible over the sound of the wind rattling the glass walls of the chapel. But Chase heard it. He nodded frantically, thinking he had found a crack in her armor. "Yes, for us. For our future. I bought the penthouse for you. I leased the Ferrari so you could arrive in style. I did it all because I love you." Maya looked at him. Then slowly she turned her head and looked at me. I was standing against the backdrop of the ocean, the afternoon sun casting a long shadow across the marble floor. I was wearing the bespoke suit that Chase had mocked. My face was calm. I did not look like a victim. I did not look like a sad, lonely old man. I looked like exactly what I was, a man who had built a fortress to protect his family even when they did not want to be protected. Maya looked at my hands, the hands she had been ashamed of, the hands she thought were too rough, too calloused, too working class to be held in public. She remembered the nights I came home smelling of ozone and copper, too tired to eat, but never too tired to check her homework. She remembered the piano disappearing. She remembered the scholarship that had paid for her degree. She looked back at Chase. "You lied to me about everything," Maya said. Her voice was gaining strength, resonating with a new frequency. "You lied about your company. You lied about your money. You lied about your name." "I didn't lie," Chase screamed, scrambling to his feet, trying to use his height to intimidate her, a tactic that had worked 1,000 times before. I projected success. That is how business works, Maya. You fake it until you make it. And we were making it. We had the check. We had the 12 million. Maya looked at her left hand. On her ring finger sat a diamond the size of a quail egg. It was a flawless, radiant-cut stone set in platinum. For months, she had shown it off to her friends. For months, she had let it define her worth. She had looked at that ring and felt like a queen. Now she looked at it and felt sick. "You told me this ring cost $50,000, Maya said, lifting her hand. "You told me it was a symbol of your success." "It is," Chase insisted. "It is the best. Only the best for you." Maya shook her head slowly. "No, Chase. It is not a symbol of your success. It is a symbol of my father's sacrifice." She began to pull at the ring. It was tight. Her fingers were swollen from the heat and the stress. But she twisted it. She pulled it with a ferocity that turned her knuckle white. Chase's eyes widened. "No, Maya, don't. That is an asset. Do not take it off. We can sell it. We can use it to pay for a lawyer." The words hung in the air, ugly and naked. "We can sell it." Even in his final moments of desperation, he did not see the ring as a promise. He saw it as liquidity. He saw it as a bail bond. Maya finally wrenched the ring over her knuckle. She held it in her palm. It was heavy, cold. It sparkled under the chapel lights, indifferent to the chaos around it. "You bought this with stolen money," Maya said. "You bought this with the money my father earned climbing poles in freezing rain. You bought this with the money meant for the workers you scammed." She took a step toward him. Chase took a step back, sensing the shift in energy. The girl he thought he could control, the girl he called clingy and useful, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had the same fire in her blood as Reginald King. "You are right about one thing," Chase Maya said, her voice steady and hard as steel. "We are not on the same level. But it is not because you are above me. It is because you are beneath me." Chase opened his mouth to argue, but Maya raised her arm. She didn't hand the ring back to him. She didn't place it on a table. She threw it. She put every ounce of her betrayal, every ounce of her shame, and every ounce of her rage into that throw. The heavy platinum ring flew through the air like a bullet. It struck Chase square in the cheekbone. The sound was a sharp, sickening crack that echoed through the silent room. A small cut opened up under his eye, and a trickle of blood began to run down his pale face. The ring clattered to the floor, spinning noisily on the marble before coming to rest near the gutter. Chase brought a hand to his face, staring at the blood on his fingers in disbelief. You threw it at me. That is 50 grand. Maya stepped into his personal space. She was not afraid of him anymore. She towered over him, not in height, but in presence. You called my father crazy, she said, pointing a shaking finger at me. You called him a dinosaur. You wished he was dead so you wouldn't have to look at him. She took a deep breath and her voice soared, filling the vaulted ceiling of the chapel. My father is not crazy, Chase. My father is a genius. He built a kingdom out of nothing while you were busy trying to inherit one. He is not a dinosaur. He is a titan. She grabbed the lapels of Chase's ruined tuxedo and shoved him backward. My father is a king, she screamed, the tears finally flowing freely, not from sadness, but from pride. His name is Reginald King, and he is 10 times the man you will ever be. Chase stumbled his heels, catching on the altar steps. He flailed, trying to find purchase, but there was nothing to hold on to. Maya stood over him, her chest heaving. And you, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than her scream. You are just a clown in a rented suit. The room erupted. It wasn't applause. It was a collective exhale of shock and awe. The guests who had watched silently now murmured in agreement. They looked at Maya with new respect. They looked at Chase with pure disgust. Chase looked up from the floor. He looked at Maya, then he looked at the ring lying in the dust, and finally he looked at me. He saw the resemblance then. He saw the same set of the jaw, the same fire in the eyes. He realized that he hadn't just married a pretty face. He had married the daughter of a lion, and he had been foolish enough to pull her tail. I walked forward then. I moved slowly, deliberately. I walked past Chase without looking at him. I walked straight to my daughter. She was trembling. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her cold and shaky. I reached out and took her hand. It was bare now. The red mark where the ring had been was fading. I am sorry, Daddy, she whispered, collapsing into my chest. I am so sorry. I wrapped my arms around her. I held her tight, shielding her from the cameras, from the whispers, from the eyes of the world. You have nothing to be sorry for, baby, I said softly into her ear. You woke up. That is all that matters. I looked over her shoulder at the police officers. I nodded. Get him out of here, I said. The officers moved in. They hauled Chase to his feet. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He hung his head, defeated not by the law but by the woman he had underestimated. As they dragged him past the ring lying on the floor, he tried to stop, tried to reach for it with his cuffed hands, a final act of greed. Leave it, the officer growled, pushing him forward. It is evidence now. We stood there, Maya and I, in the center of the ruined wedding. The flowers were perfect. The music had stopped. The groom was in handcuffs. But for the first time in years, the air felt clean. Maya pulled back and looked at me. She wiped her eyes. Did you really buy a helicopter? She asked, a small, watery smile breaking through the pain. I chuckled. I had to make an entrance, didn't I? Kings don't take the shuttle bus. Maya laughed. It was a broken sound, but it was a start. She took my arm, gripping it tightly as if afraid I would disappear if she let go. Let's go home, Dad, she said. We walked down the aisle together. Not as bride and father of the bride, but as survivors of a storm we had weathered together. The guests parted for us, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. They knew they had witnessed something legendary. They had seen a house of cards fall and a fortress of stone revealed underneath. As we stepped out into the blinding sunlight, leaving Chase Sterling and his lies in the shadows behind us, I knew the road ahead would be hard. Maya had healing to do. I had trust to rebuild. But we had the one thing that Chase never had and never would. We had the truth. If you cheered when Maya threw that ring, hit the like button right now. That was the moment she took her power back. But the story isn't over yet. Chase is gone, but the fallout is massive. Wait until you hear what happened when we got back to the house and Maya found the secret room. It is a scene that will bring tears to your eyes. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss the emotional conclusion. Let me know in the comments. What is the best way to deal with a liar? Confront them or let them destroy themselves? I think we did a little bit of both. The back of a police cruiser is a very small place for a man with an ego the size of Manhattan. I did not ride with him, but Dante gave me the full report later. Apparently, Chase spent the entire 20-minute ride to the precinct screaming. He screamed about his rights. He screamed about his connections. He threatened the officers with lawsuits that would leave them homeless. He claimed he was a personal friend of the mayor, a lie so easily disproven it was almost pitiable. The officers just turned up the radio. They knew exactly who he was. He was just another white-collar criminal who thought the laws of gravity did not apply to him because he wore a tuxedo. By the time they dragged him into the booking area of the 19th precinct, the adrenaline had started to fade, replaced by the cold, shaking reality of withdrawal. Not from drugs, though I suspected he dabbled, but from power. Chase was an addict of validation, and for the first time in his life, he was in a room where no one cared about his follower count or his valuation. He was just a fingerprint scan and a mugshot. They stripped him of his tuxedo jacket. They took his shoelaces so he wouldn't hurt himself. They took his watch, the vintage Rolex he had bought with my money just days before. And finally, they gave him his one phone call. I was sitting in the observation room with the precinct captain, an old friend named Marcus who I had helped with a tricky electrical fire investigation back in the 90s. We watched through the one-way glass. Chase picked up the receiver with trembling hands. I knew who he was calling. Harrison Sterling, no relation but the most expensive defense attorney in the city, the kind of lawyer who could get a shark off on a biting charge. I watched Chase dial. I saw his face light up with desperate hope when the line connected. Harrison. Thank God, Chase shouted into the phone, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. You have to get down here. It is a nightmare. They arrested me at my wedding. It is a setup, that old man Reginald King, he hacked my accounts. I leaned forward, turning up the volume on the speaker in the observation room. On the other end of the line, I didn't hear Harrison's smooth, reassuring voice. I heard his paralegal, and she sounded tired. Mr. Sterling, the woman said coldly. Mr. Harrison has instructed me to inform you that our firm is no longer representing you. What? Chase shrieked. What are you talking about? I pay him a $50,000 monthly retainer. Get him on the phone. Your retainer payment for this month was reversed an hour ago, the paralegal explained. The bank marked it as funds from illegal activity, subject to seizure by Onyx Ventures. Your account with us is currently in the negative, Mr. Sterling. And given the nature of the charges, embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny, we do not take cases on contingency. Chase slammed his hand against the wall. I will get the money. I have investors. Just get him down here, Mr. Sterling. The woman continued, her voice dropping an octave. We also saw the live stream. The footage from the yacht Mr. Harrison finds your comments about. Eliminating your father-in-law to be legally indefensible and morally repugnant. We are done. Do not call this office again. The line clicked dead. Chase stood there holding the receiver, the dial tone buzzing like an angry insect in his ear. He looked at the phone as if it had betrayed him. He dialed again and again. He called his groomsmen. Voicemail. He called his business partners. Blocked number. He even tried calling his mother in Connecticut. She didn't pick up. The news had traveled fast. The rats had not only fled the ship, they were already pretending they had never been on board. The officer took the phone from his hand. That is it, Sterling. Into the cage. They walked him to interrogation room B. It was a small windowless box with a metal table and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. The air conditioning was cranked up too high, a classic tactic to make suspects uncomfortable. Chase sat there shivering in his shirt sleeves, his head in his hands. He looked small. He looked broken. But I knew men like Chase. He wasn't broken yet. He was just paused. Inside that head, the gears were still turning, looking for an angle, a loophole, a person he could blame. I waited for an hour. I let him sit in the silence. I let him stare at the mirror, wondering if I was behind it. I let him feel the weight of the handcuffs on his wrists. Then I opened the door. Chase jumped. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. For a second, the old arrogance flared up. You, he spat. You are here to gloat. You think you won. My lawyer is going to eat you alive. I closed the heavy steel door behind me. It locked with a solid thud. I didn't sit down. I stood by the door holding a single manila folder. You do not have a lawyer, Chase, I said quietly. You do not have any money to pay for one. And even the public defender is going to take one look at the mountain of evidence I just handed to the district attorney and tell you to plead guilty. Chase laughed, but it sounded like a cough. You can't prove intent. I was just moving funds around. It is standard business practice. I was going to pay it back. I walked over to the table and tossed the folder down. It slid across the metal surface and stopped right in front of his cuffed hands. "Open it," I said. Chase hesitated. He looked at the folder like it was a bomb. Slowly he reached out and flipped it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was not a legal summons. It was a typed confession. It detailed everything. The fake investors, the stolen code, the Ponzi scheme structure of Sterling Energy, the embezzlement of the payroll, and the deliberate attempt to defraud Maya King for marital assets. "What is this?" Chase whispered. "It is your life raft," I said. I pulled out the other chair and finally sat down. I looked him in the eye. I didn't look at him with anger anymore. I looked at him with the exhausted patience of a parent dealing with a dangerous child. "Right now, the district attorney is preparing charges that carry a mandatory minimum of 20 years, I explained. Wire fraud alone gets you 10, grand larceny gets you 5, and the tax evasion. That is the cherry on top. You are looking at spending the next 2 decades in a federal penitentiary. You will be 50 years old when you get out. Your youth, your looks, your potential all gone." Chase swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. But I continued leaning in. "I have a friend in the DA's office, and I am the primary victim. I am the one who lost $12 million. If I choose to advocate for leniency, if I choose to say that you cooperated and returned the assets voluntarily, they will listen." I tapped the paper. "Sign this confession. Admit to everything. Waive your right to a trial. If you do that, I will recommend a sentence of 5 years. With good behavior, you could be out in 3. 3 years. Chase breathed. "It is a gift, Chase," I said sternly. "It is 3 years in a minimum security facility instead of 20 years in a maximum security hellhole. It is a chance to start over while you are still young enough to learn how to work for a living." Chase looked at the paper. He picked up the pen that was clipped to it. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. "Why?" he asked, looking up at me. "Why are you helping me? You hate me. You destroyed my wedding. You humiliated me. Why give me a way out?" I looked at the one-way mirror. I knew Marcus was listening. "I am not doing this for you," I said. "I am doing this for my daughter." Chase frowned. "Maya, if you go to trial, I said you will drag this out for years. You will call her to the stand. You will try to blame her. You will claim she knew about the fraud. You will drag her name through the mud to save your own skin. I know you, Chase. You will burn everyone you touch to stay warm." I stood up. "I want you gone. I want you erased from her life completely. I want a clean break. 5 years gives her time to heal. 5 years gives her time to find a real man. 5 years makes you a memory, not a recurring nightmare." Chase looked down at the paper again. He realized then that I had outmaneuvered him completely. I wasn't just holding the financial cards, I was holding the emotional ones too. I was buying his silence with his freedom. "And if I don't sign," Chase asked, a faint glimmer of defiance remaining. "Then I walk out that door," I said simply, "and I tell the DA to go for the maximum. I will spend every penny of my fortune hiring private investigators to find every dirtbag you ever scammed. I will make sure you are buried under so many lawsuits that you will never breathe fresh air again." I checked my watch. "You have 30 seconds. Chase looked at the pen. He looked at the door. He looked at me. He realized that the broke electrician was the most powerful man he had ever met. He realized that true power isn't about noise, it's about control. He uncapped the pen. He didn't read the text. He didn't argue. He signed his name at the bottom of the page, Chase Sterling. The signature was shaky, nothing like the bold autograph he practiced for his fans. It was the signature of a defeated man. He pushed the paper back to me. "Done," Chase whispered. I took the paper. I checked the signature. I folded it and put it back in the folder. "Smartest business decision you ever made," I said. I turned to leave. I knocked on the metal door for the guard. "Wait!" Chase called out. I paused, my hand on the door handle. "Did you really sell the piano?" he asked. His voice was small. "Maya. She told me once that you sold her mother's piano to pay for her college. But you are rich. Did you really sell it?" I looked back at him. "Yes," I said. "I was rich then too. But I sold it because I wanted her to value her education. I wanted her to think we were sacrificing so she wouldn't take it for granted. I wanted to build character." I looked him up and down. "Something your father obviously never did for you." The guard opened the door. I stepped out into the hallway, the cool air hitting my face. I walked past the observation room where Marcus gave me a thumbs up. I walked out of the precinct. It was night now. The city lights were on. My city. My grid. I had just negotiated the most important deal of my life. I had bought my daughter's freedom for the price of mercy. I got into the back of the waiting car where Dante was sitting. Did he sign? Dante asked. I handed him the folder. File it with the DA. Dante opened it and whistled. 5 years. You went easy on him, Reggie. Maybe, I said, looking out the window at the skyline. But sometimes the best revenge is simply moving on. Drive me home, Dante. I have a daughter waiting for me. And I think it is time I showed her what is behind the bookcase. If you want to see the moment Maya discovers the secret I have kept for 20 years, and the tearful reunion that ends this saga, make sure you are subscribed. The final chapter is coming up, and it is the most beautiful part of the story. Do you think I should have let him rot for 20 years, or was 5 years the right call to protect Maya? Let me know in the comments. The drive back to Queens was the longest journey of my life. It was not measured in miles, but in the distance between who my daughter thought I was and who I actually turned out to be. Maya sat in the back of the limousine, staring out the tinted window at the passing city lights. She did not speak. She was still wearing her wedding dress, though the hem was stained with dirt and the lace was torn where she had snagged it getting into the car. She looked like a refugee from a war zone, which, in a way, she was. She was fleeing the wreckage of a life built on lies. When we pulled into the driveway of my modest brick house, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. Maya looked at the peeling paint on the window frames. She looked at the old Ford sedan parked in the spot where Chase used to park his leased Ferrari. For years she had looked at this house with shame. She had apologized to her friends for it. She had begged me to move to a condo in the city. Now she looked at it with a strange kind of reverence. She realized that this house was not a prison of poverty. It was a fortress of discipline. "Come inside, Maya," I said, gently opening the car door for her. She stepped out, her silk shoes sinking into the grass. She walked up the steps she had run down 1,000 times as a child. She walked into the hallway that smelled of lemon polish and old books. She stood in the center of the living room, clutching her arms as if she were cold. "Dad," she whispered, "I do not have anywhere else to go. Chase canceled the lease on our apartment weeks ago. I did not know." "You are home," I said. "You always have a place here." I walked past her to the bookshelf at the end of the hall, the same bookshelf I had opened the night I decided to destroy Chase Sterling. "Maya," I said, "come here. There is something you need to see." She followed me, her dress rustling softly. I reached for the copy of Invisible Man and pulled the spine. The hydraulic hiss of the hidden door opening made her jump. Her eyes went wide as the heavy oak case swung outward, revealing the cool, blue-lit sanctum of King Grid Solutions. She stared into the room. She saw the banks of servers humming with the data of the eastern seaboard. She saw the multiple monitors displaying real-time energy arbitrage markets. She saw the awards on the wall, the patents framed in glass, the photos of me shaking hands with governors and mayors who needed my help to keep their cities running. "What is this?" she breathed, stepping over the threshold. "This is my life, Maya," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "This is what paid for your private school. This is what paid for your braces. This is what paid for the degree you hung on your wall." She walked into the room slowly, afraid to touch anything. She looked at the screens. She saw the logo of Onyx Ventures. She saw the bank balance on the main ledger, a number with so many zeros it made her dizzy. You are a billionaire," she asked, her voice trembling. "Not quite," I said, "but close enough that I never have to worry about the price of milk." She turned to look at me, betrayal warring with awe in her eyes. Why did you make us live like that? Why did you drive that old car? Why did you let me believe we were poor?" I walked over to a filing cabinet in the corner. It was an old dented metal cabinet, the only ugly thing in the room. "Because," I said, pulling out a thick leather-bound ledger, "I wanted you to build your own muscles. I wanted you to know the value of $1 before I gave you 1,000,000 of them. I was afraid that if you knew about this, you would turn out like Chase. Entitled, hollow, weak." I placed the ledger on the desk in front of her. "Read it," I said. Maya opened the book. It was a handwritten log of every major expense I had made over the last 30 years. But it wasn't a log of luxuries. It was a log of sacrifices. She ran her finger down the page. August 1998. Maya's braces. Cost $5,000. Source overtime shift double holiday pay. September 2005. Maya's summer camp. Cost $3,000. Source consulting fee Consolidated Edison. She flipped the pages, her breathing getting faster. She saw her life measured out in my labor. She saw that every nice thing she ever had came from a specific job, a specific project, a specific sacrifice. Then she stopped. Her finger froze on a page dated from her sophomore year of college, October 2010. Maya's tuition and housing, Columbia University. Cost $42,000. Under the column marked Source of Funds, it didn't say investment dividend or savings. It read, Sale of Beatrice's Steinway piano. Buyer private collector in London. Maya let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. She covered her mouth with her hand. She stared at the words. The piano. The piano she thought was in storage. The piano she had learned to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on. The piano that was the only physical piece of her mother left in the house. You sold it, she whispered, tears spilling onto the page. You told me it was in storage. You told me you got a bonus. I didn't get a bonus, I said softly. I was cash poor that year. All my capital was tied up in infrastructure. But you needed to stay in school. And I promised your mother I would give you the world. Maya collapsed into the office chair. She buried her face in her hands and wept. She cried with the gut-wrenching force of a person whose entire reality has been shattered and rearranged in a single instant. I called you small, she sobbed, her voice muffled by her palms. I stood in that diner and called you small. I told you that you were jealous of Chase. I told you that you didn't understand success. She looked up at me, her face ravaged by grief. You sold Mom's piano for me, and I threw it in your face. I brought a man into this house who mocked you. I let him laugh at you. I let him treat you like a servant, and you just took it. You took it all to protect me. I stood there watching her pain. It was necessary pain. It was the pain of a bone breaking so it could be set straight. I am the worst daughter in the world, she choked out. I am just like him. I am shallow. I am ungrateful. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. She put her head down on the desk right on top of the ledger and cried until her shoulders shook. I let her cry. I let her wash away the arrogance and the blindness. I stood guard over her grief just as I had stood guard over her life. When her sobs turned into quiet hiccups, I turned and walked out of the room. I went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and took out a bag of okra, some chicken, and the spices I kept in a special jar. I began to cook. The rhythmic chopping of the vegetables filled the silent house. I fired up the stove. I added the roux, stirring it slowly until it turned the color of dark chocolate. I added the stock. The smell began to waft through the house, a rich, earthy, spicy scent that was the signature of this home. It was the smell of my wife Beatrice. It was the smell of comfort. 20 minutes later, Maya walked into the kitchen. She had washed her face, but her eyes were red and swollen. She had taken off the wedding dress and was wearing one of my old flannel shirts she must have found in the laundry room. It swallowed her small frame, making her look like a child again. She stood by the table looking at the steaming bowl of gumbo I had placed there. Is that okra stew? She asked weakly. Mom's recipe, I said, handing her a spoon. Sit. Eat. She sat down. She took a spoonful. Her hand was shaking. She put it in her mouth and closed her eyes. The taste was a time machine. It took her back to a time before Chase, before the ambition, before the lies. Dad, she said, putting the spoon down, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to apologize. I feel like I have ruined everything. I sat down opposite her with my own bowl. Maya looked at me. She raised her eyes. They were filled with fear, fear that I would reject her, fear that I would finally unleash the anger she thought I was holding back. I am not angry, I said. And you didn't ruin everything. You just took a very expensive course, a course, she asked. Life is a university, Maya. Some people learn from books, some people learn from watching others, and some hard-headed people like you and me, we have to learn by touching the stove to see if it is hot. I pointed to the wedding dress bundled up in the corner of the hallway. Chase was a lesson, a painful one. He taught you that glitter isn't gold. He taught you that a loud voice doesn't mean a strong mind. And he taught you that the people who want to show you off usually don't care about you, they care about the reflection you give them. But I hurt you, she whispered. I disrespected you. Yes, you did, I admitted. And that is the tuition fee. That guilt you feel, that is the price of the degree. You carry it for a while. You let it remind you to be humble. You let it remind you to look deeper than the surface. But you do not let it drown you. I reached across the table and took her hand. You are my daughter Maya. I didn't build that server room for me. I built it for us. I built it so that when you finally woke up, when you finally saw the world, clearly you would have the resources to change it. Maya squeezed my hand. Tears leaked from her eyes again, but these were different. These were tears of relief, tears of gratitude. You are a great man, Dad, she said. I see that now. I see the king. I chuckled, breaking the tension. Eat your soup before it gets cold, I said, and tomorrow we have work to do. What work? She asked, wiping her face. I own a company called Sterling Energy now, I said, taking a bite of chicken. It is a mess. The code is garbage, the finances are a disaster, and the brand is toxic. I need a new CEO, someone smart, someone who knows marketing, someone who isn't afraid to get her hands dirty to clean up a mess. Maya looked at me, her mouth falling open slightly. Me? She asked. You want me to run it? After everything? I shrugged. You know the company better than anyone. You know where the bodies are buried, and frankly, you owe me about $12 million. I figure you can work it off over the next 20 years. Maya stared at me for a long second. Then a small smile touched her lips. It was a genuine smile. I will rename it, she said. Oh, I asked. What will you call it? She looked at the empty chair at the head of the table, the chair where her mother used to sit. Beatrice Tech, she said firmly. We will call it Beatrice Tech. I felt a lump in my throat. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. That sounds like a solid business plan, I managed to say. We sat there in the kitchen, an old electrician and his daughter eating stew, while the world outside continued to spin. The wedding was a disaster. The groom was in jail. The scandal was all over the internet. But in that kitchen, everything was perfect. The foundation had held. The storm had passed. And for the first time in years, the lights in the house burned bright and true. If you are crying right now, don't worry. I cried too when she said the name Beatrice. It is amazing how much healing can happen over a bowl of soup. But the story isn't quite over. Chase has one last desperate move to make from behind bars, and you won't believe who shows up at my door 6 months later. Make sure you are subscribed for the final payoff. This journey has been wild, and I want you there for the finish line. 6 months is a long time in the world of business, but it is an eternity in the life of a man waiting for a prison sentence. The seasons had changed, turning the lush green of summer into the stark gray of a New York winter. Inside my house in Queens, things had changed too. The silence that used to hang over the hallway was gone, replaced by the sound of Maya on conference calls. She had taken over Sterling Energy, renamed it Beatrice Tech, and was currently in the process of salvaging the wreckage Chase had left behind. She was working harder than she ever had in her life, and she was happier than I had ever seen her. We were healing. We were moving forward. I thought the ghost of Chase Sterling was locked away in a holding cell or buried under a mountain of legal paperwork. I thought we were safe. But desperation has a way of making men do stupid things, and on a rainy Tuesday night in November, the past came knocking on my door one last time. It started with a perimeter alert on my phone. It was 11 at night. The wind was howling outside, rattling the old window frames. I was in the kitchen making tea while Maya was in the living room reviewing a contract. When the phone buzzed, I frowned. I checked the camera feed, expecting to see a stray cat or maybe a delivery driver who had the wrong address. What I saw made my blood run cold, not from fear but from disgust. Standing at my front gate, soaking wet in the freezing rain, was a figure that looked like a funhouse mirror reflection of the man who had almost married my daughter. He was thin, gaunt, his cheekbones protruding sharply from a face covered in uneven stubble. He was wearing a suit, but it was not a bespoke tuxedo. It was a cheap, ill-fitting polyester thing, likely bought from a thrift store. He was shivering violently, clutching the bars of the gate like a prisoner looking out. It was Chase. He had made bail. Dante had told me his parents had liquidated their retirement accounts and sold their home in Connecticut to post the bond. They had bankrupted themselves to buy their son a few months of freedom before the inevitable trial. And what did he do with that freedom? Did he spend time with the parents he had ruined? Did he prepare his defense? No, he came here. I walked into the living room. Maya looked up, seeing the expression on my face. "What is it, Dad? Is it the storm?" I handed her the tablet. She looked at the screen. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just stared at the grainy black and white image of the man she had once promised to love forever. "He looks like a ghost," she whispered. "He is a ghost," I said, taking the tablet back. "He is a ghost looking for a body to possess. Stay here, Maya. You do not need to see this." "I will not hide, Dad," she said, standing up. Her voice was firm. She walked over to the wall-mounted intercom panel next to the front door. She pressed the video button, bringing the feed up on the main screen. I watched as Chase peered through the bars. He looked desperate. His eyes were darting around, wild and bloodshot. He pressed the buzzer again, and again. I pressed the talk button, but I did not unlock the gate. "What do you want, Chase?" I said. My voice was amplified by the speaker at the gate, cutting through the sound of the rain. Chase jumped. He looked up at the camera. He wiped the rain from his face with a trembling hand. "Dad!" he shouted. His voice was cracked and hoarse. "Dad, please, let me in. It is freezing out here." "I am not your father," I said coldly. "And you are trespassing. You are out on bail, Chase. One call to the police and your bond is revoked. You go straight back to Rikers." No, please don't call them," Chase begged, dropping to his knees on the wet pavement. It was a pathetic echo of the moment in the church. "I just want to talk. I need to talk to Maya. Is she there? Please tell me she is there." Maya stood next to me, her arms crossed. She didn't say a word. "She doesn't want to speak to you," I said. "Go home, Chase. Go back to your parents." "I can't." Chase sobbed. The sound was distorted by the wind, but the misery was clear. "I can't face them. They look at me like I am a failure. But you guys are family. You have to help me." I looked at him with disbelief. After everything, after the theft, after the insults, after wishing for my death, he still believed he could manipulate us. He still believed that if he played the victim hard enough, we would open the door. "I am not asking for money," Chase yelled over the thunder. "I know I messed up. I know I was greedy, but I have changed. Prison, the holding cell, it changed me, Dad. I see the light now. I just want a chance for what I asked. A chance to work," Chase pleaded, pressing his face against the cold metal bars. "I will do anything. I know the company. I know the code. I will work for free. I will be the janitor. I will make the coffee. Just let me be near her. I love her, Dad. I really love her." He began to cry. Great heaving sobs that shook his skinny frame. It was the performance of a lifetime. The prodigal son returning humble and broken, begging for scraps. "I love her more than anything," he wailed. "I was blinded by ambition, but my heart was always hers. Please, open the gate." "Open. Just for 5 minutes. I have nowhere else to go. I am starving." I looked at Maya. I wanted to see if his words had any effect. I wanted to see if the old Maya, the one who needed to be needed, would surface. She looked at the screen. She watched him cry. She watched him shiver. Then she leaned into the microphone. "Chase," she said. Chase's head snapped up. "Maya. Baby. Is that you? Oh, thank God. Please. Open the door. I am so cold." Maya looked at the image of the man kneeling in the dirt. "You are not cold, Chase," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You are just broke." Chase froze. "You don't love me," she continued. "You never loved me. You loved the idea of me. You loved that I was a stepping stone. And now that you have fallen off the cliff, you are looking for a cushion. But I am not a cushion, Chase. I am a concrete wall." "Maya, please," Chase screamed, panic setting in. "Don't say that. We are soulmates. Remember Paris. Remember the plans we made." "I remember you wishing my father would die," she said. I remember you stealing from your employees. I remember you buying a diamond necklace for your mistress with our wedding money." She stepped back from the intercom. "I have nothing left to say to you. Goodbye, Chase." She turned and walked back to the kitchen, leaving me alone with the ghost at the gate. I looked at him. He was still kneeling, but the sadness was turning into anger now. The mask was slipping. "Open the damn door, Reginald," he shouted, pounding on the bars. "You owe me. You stole my company. You stole my life. You are sitting in there warm and rich while I am out here like a dog." I pressed the button one last time. "You are right," I said. "You are out there like a dog, but unlike a dog, you had a choice. You chose to bite the hand that fed you." I leaned closer to the microphone, dropping my voice to a low growl. "And Chase, you are wrong about one thing." What Chase spat, wiping snot from his nose. "I didn't steal your life. I repossessed it. And as for my company, if you ever come within 500 feet of this house or my daughter again, I won't call the police." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "I have installed a new security system since you left, and it involves 3 very large, very hungry Rottweilers who patrol the grounds at night. I haven't fed them since this morning." Chase's eyes went wide. He scrambled back from the gate, looking nervously at the shadows of the garden. "You wouldn't," he stammered. "Try me," I said. "Get off my property, now." I released the talk button. I watched on the screen. Chase stood there for one more second, weighing his desperation against his fear. Then a shadow moved in the garden, just a tree branch swaying in the wind, but it was enough. He yelped. He turned and ran. He ran down the wet street, slipping and sliding, his cheap shoes splashing in the puddles. He ran until he disappeared into the darkness of the city that had chewed him up and spit him out. I stood there for a moment watching the empty street. I felt a profound sense of closure. The leech had been removed, the wound had been cauterized. I walked back into the kitchen. Maya was sitting at the table nursing her tea. She looked up at me. "Is he gone?" she asked. "He is gone," I said, sitting down opposite her. "And he won't be back." "Are you really going to get dogs?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. I laughed. "I might. Beatrice always liked dogs. But for tonight, I think the threat was enough." We sat there in the warm yellow light of the kitchen, listening to the rain wash the streets clean. The nightmare was finally truly over. Chase Sterling was just a bad memory, a lesson learned in the hard school of life. And as I looked at my daughter, strong and free, I knew that the tuition had been worth every penny. But life has a funny way of surprising you just when you think the story is done. Chase was the storm, but the rainbow was yet to come. And 6 months after that rainy night, I received a letter that would change the legacy of the King family forever. If you want to know how this story truly ends and the final surprising twist that brings everything full circle, make sure you are subscribed. You have stuck with me this far, and I promise the ending is worth it. Let me know in the comments if you would have opened the gate or if you would have released the dogs. I think we all know what I would have done. See you in the finale. The day they took down the sign was one of the best days of my life. I stood on the sidewalk across the street from the glass tower that used to be the headquarters of Sterling Energy. I watched as a crane slowly lowered the massive chrome letters that spelled out Chase's name. Sterling. Each letter that came down felt like a weight being lifted off my chest. Each bolt that was unscrewed was a correction of a mistake that had gone on for far too long. Passers-by stopped to watch. They whispered. They took photos. They knew the story. Everyone in the city knew the story by now. The rise and fall of the boy wonder who tried to con the wrong electrician. But they weren't watching for the demolition. They were watching for the resurrection. As the chrome letters hit the pavement with a hollow clang, a new team moved in. They hoisted a new sign. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't chrome. It was brushed bronze, elegant and understated, lit from behind with a warm, steady glow. Beatrice Tech. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall as an offering to the woman who had inspired it all. Beatrice never cared about being famous. She never cared about having her name in lights. But she cared about truth. She cared about reliability. And that was what this company was going to stand for from now on. I walked into the lobby. The juice bar was gone. The ping-pong table was gone. The pretension was stripped away, replaced by serious workstations and engineers who were actually working. And there in the center of the chaos was my CEO. Maya was wearing a hard hat and a safety vest over her business suit. She was holding a blueprint, arguing passionately with a structural engineer about load-bearing servers. She didn't look like the girl who had cried over a diamond ring. She looked tired. She looked stressed. But she looked alive. When she saw me, she waved the engineers away and walked over. She hugged me, smelling of coffee and drywall dust. "How does it look up there, Dad?" she asked, pointing to the ceiling. "It looks like justice," I said. "It looks like home." I followed her to the elevator. We didn't go to the penthouse. We went to the server floor. This was where the real work happened. Maya swiped her keycard, a card that now gave her access to everything. Not because she was my daughter, but because she had earned it. Over the last 6 months, Maya had worked harder than I had ever seen anyone work. She had liquidated the luxury assets. She had apologized personally to every employee Chase had tried to stiff. She had renegotiated contracts with vendors using honesty as her leverage instead of hype. She had turned a Ponzi scheme into a legitimate utility provider. We stood in front of the main server bank. The lights were blinking a steady rhythmic green. "You did good, baby," I said. "You saved it." "We saved it," she corrected. "I just followed the manual." She handed me a tablet. It showed the quarterly projections. Beatrice Tech was profitable, not buy a yacht profitable, but pay the workers and have money left over for R&D profitable. "Dad," she said, looking at the blinking lights, "I have been thinking. The penthouse office. It is too much. I want to turn it into a training center for inner-city kids. Teach them coding, teach them electrical engineering. Give them the same chance you gave Dante." I looked at her. My heart swelled so big I thought it might crack a rib. "Do it," I said. "Your mother would have loved that." She smiled. It was Beatrice's smile. But while we were building a future, the past still had one final debt to settle. The sentencing hearing for Chase Sterling took place 3 weeks after his desperate visit to my gate. I didn't have to go. My lawyer Dante told me I could submit a victim impact statement in writing. But I wanted to be there. I needed to see the book close. The courtroom was packed. The press was there, hungry for one last photo of the fallen idol. When the bailiffs led Chase in, a hush fell over the room. He looked terrible. The suit he wore was the same cheap polyester one he had worn in the rain, now wrinkled and stained. He had lost 20 pounds. His eyes were hollow, stripped of the arrogance that had once fueled him. He saw me in the front row. I was wearing my bespoke suit. I sat tall. I looked him in the eye. He flinched and looked away. The plea deal we had discussed at the precinct, the 5 years I had promised him in exchange for his confession, was on the table. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, reviewed the documents. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, "you have pleaded guilty to wire fraud and grand larceny. The prosecution has recommended a sentence of 60 months. Do you have anything to say?" Chase stood up. His hands were shaking. I am sorry, Your Honor. I just want to serve my time and start over." It seemed like it was over. 5 years. A slap on the wrist for the magnitude of his crimes, but enough to erase him from our lives. But then the prosecutor stood up. He looked at me and I nodded. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "while the state stands by the plea regarding the initial charges, new evidence has come to light in the last 48 hours. Evidence provided by Mr. King's forensic accounting team." Chase's head snapped up. He looked at me with panic. It seems the prosecutor continued, holding up a thick file, that Mr. Sterling was not entirely honest in his asset disclosure. "We have uncovered a series of cryptocurrency wallets hidden on an encrypted server in Estonia containing nearly $2 million of stolen investor funds. Funds he attempted to launder even while out on bail." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Chase turned pale. He gripped the defense table. That is old. I forgot about those." "You forgot about $2 million, the judge asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Or were you planning to use that as a nest egg when you got out?" I sat back in the wooden bench. I had found those wallets the night he came to my gate. After he ran away, I went back to my server room. I knew a man like Chase would always have a bolt hole. I tracked the digital footprint of his business trips to Europe. I found the keys. He had broken the truce. He had come to my house. He had tried to manipulate my daughter one last time, and so I decided that 5 years wasn't enough. The judge slammed her gavel. In light of this new evidence and the defendant's clear lack of remorse and continued attempts to conceal assets, I am rejecting the sentencing recommendation. She looked down at Chase over her glasses. Mr. Sterling, you are a predator. You preyed on family. You preyed on investors. And you preyed on the court's patience. I am sentencing you to 96 months in a federal correctional facility. That is 8 years. No possibility of parole for the first 6. 8 years, Chase screamed. He spun around to look at me. You promised? You said 5. I looked at him calmly. I promised 5 if you walked away, I thought to myself. But you came back. Chase was dragging his feet as the bailiffs hauled him away. He was screaming my name. He was screaming Maya's name. But no one was listening. He was yesterday's news. He was a glitch in the system that had finally been patched out. As the heavy oak doors swung shut behind him, cutting off his cries, I felt a deep, resonant silence settle over my soul. It was done. That evening I sat on the front porch of my house in Queens. The rain had cleared, leaving the air crisp and clean. The neighborhood was quiet. Mrs. Higgins across the street was watering her petunias. She waved at me. Evening, Reggie, she called out. Evening, Martha, I called back. She didn't know I was a multimillionaire who had just taken down a tech mogul. To her, I was just Reggie, the retired guy who kept his lawn tidy, and that was exactly how I liked it. I had a glass of bourbon on the table next to me, the good stuff this time. On the old turntable I had brought out to the porch, a vinyl record was spinning. It was John Coltrane, A Love Supreme, Beatrice's favorite. The saxophone notes floated out into the night air, complex and beautiful. I looked at my hands. They were old, they were scarred, but they were steady. I looked at the driveway. The old Ford was still there. I could have bought a Bentley. I could have bought a mansion in the Hamptons. I could have moved into the penthouse my daughter now controlled, but I didn't want any of that. I looked at the peeling paint on the railing. I would have to fix that next weekend. I would go to the hardware store, buy a gallon of white primer, and do it myself. Because that was who I was. I was not defined by the money in the bank. I was defined by the work I did. I was defined by the daughter I raised. I was defined by the promises I kept. Maya's car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out carrying a stack of files and a takeout bag from our favorite Thai place. She looked exhausted, but happy. "Hey, Dad," she said, coming up the steps. "Celebrating." "Just listening to the music, baby," I said. She sat down on the swing next to me. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "He is gone, isn't he?" she asked softly. "He is gone," I confirmed. 8 years. By the time he gets out, the world will have moved on. Beatrice Tech will be an empire, and you will be untouchable. Maya sighed, closing her eyes. "I am already untouchable, Dad, because I have you." We sat there for a long time watching the stars come out over Queens. We didn't need to say anything else. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. It was full of love, full of peace, and full of the quiet, unshakable power of the truth. I took a sip of my bourbon. It tasted like victory. They say money can't buy happiness. And maybe they are right. But money, when used correctly, can buy justice. It can buy safety. And it can buy the freedom to sit on your own porch, listen to your wife's favorite song, and know that your legacy is safe. I am Reginald King. I am an electrician. I am a father. And I am the man who turned the lights back on. Thank you for walking this road with me. It has been a long journey from the shadows to the light. If my story touched you, if it made you think about the value of family and the cost of lies, please share it. You never know who needs to hear it. And remember, no matter how dark it gets, you have the power to flip the switch. This is Reginald signing off. Take care of your people, and never, ever underestimate the quiet man in the corner. It has been 2 years since the sign went up. 2 years since the name Sterling was scrubbed from the skyline and replaced with the name of the woman who started it all. If you walk past the headquarters of Beatrice Tech today, you will not see a line of Ferraris parked out front. You will not see a lobby designed to look like a nightclub. What you will see is a busy office full of engineers who are actually building things. You will see a company that has secured contracts to modernize the power grid for 3 major cities. And if you are lucky, you might catch a glimpse of the CEO. Maya does not sit in a glass tower looking down on the world. She gave up the corner office. She turned it into a classroom for the internship program she started. She works from a modest desk on the third floor right next to the lead developers. She wears jeans and boots to work most days. She knows the name of every security guard and every janitor in the building. She runs the company with the same quiet discipline that I used to run my household. She finally understands that leadership is not about being served, it is about serving. Last month she invited me to the annual company gala. I expected a fancy dinner at a hotel. Instead, she took me to a community center in the Bronx. The room was filled with young kids, mostly from neighborhoods just like the one I grew up in. They were holding robotics kits and circuit boards, their eyes wide with the same curiosity I had when I was their age. Maya took the stage. She did not talk about stock prices. She did not talk about market share. She talked about opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice clear and strong. My father sold his most creating possession so I could have an education. He sacrificed his past to give me a future. Today, I want to pay that forward. She unveiled a large check. It was for the Reginald King Scholarship for Future Engineers. It was a fully funded program that would pay for the tuition, housing, and books for 50 students every year. I sat in the front row, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry in public. I looked at those kids, and I saw the piano. I saw the overtime shifts. I saw the cold nights in the bucket truck. It was all worth it. Every struggle, every humiliation, every moment of silence had led to this. My sacrifice had not just saved my daughter, it was now going to save 50 other families. After the ceremony, Maya came over to me. She handed me a small box. Inside was a set of keys. "Is this for a new car?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "No," she smiled. "It is for the piano. I found the collector in London, Dad. I bought Mom's Steinway back. It is being delivered to the house tomorrow." I looked at her and I saw Beatrice looking back at me. We had come full circle. The music was coming home. As for me, I am still in Queens. Mrs. Higgins still waves to me every morning. I still drive a Ford, though I did upgrade to a newer model with heated seats. My back appreciates that. I do not live like a billionaire. I do not need to. You see, I learned a long time ago that there are two kinds of wealth. There is the loud kind, the kind Chase Sterling chased, the kind that screams, "Look at me," because it is terrified that if you look away, it will disappear. That kind of wealth is a prison. It requires constant maintenance, constant lying, and constant fear. Then there is the quiet kind, the kind that sits in a hidden server room behind a bookshelf, the kind that allows you to walk into a room wearing a cheap suit and know that you own the building, the kind that gives you the freedom to protect the people you love without asking anyone for permission. That is real wealth. Wealth is not the car you drive. Wealth is the ability to stand between your child and a monster and say, "You shall not pass." Wealth is the ability to sleep at night knowing that your foundation is built on rock, not sand. Chase Sterling is currently sitting in a cell in upstate New York. He writes letters sometimes, mostly to Maya, asking for forgiveness, asking for money, asking for a second chance. She burns them. She does not hate him anymore. Hate takes energy. She just feels nothing. He is a lesson she has graduated from. I spend my evenings on the porch now. Tomorrow the piano arrives and I will fill the house with music again. But tonight I am content with the silence. It is a peaceful silence, a silence earned. I look at the streetlights flickering on down the block. I know exactly how much power they are drawing. I know the path the current takes to get there. And I know that as long as I am breathing, the lights will stay on for my family. My name is Reginald King. I was never broke. I was just saving up for the things that mattered. True wealth isn't loud. It doesn't need to scream for attention or belittle others to feel significant. It whispers in the quiet confidence of a father protecting his child and roars only when justice demands it. Chase mistook silence for weakness and humility for poverty, a fatal error that cost him everything. In a world obsessed with appearances, never underestimate the power of a quiet man with a plan. Dignity is the only currency that never devalues, and integrity is the only investment that guarantees a return. Be careful who you step on. They might be the ground holding you up. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me share these lessons with more people who might need to hear them. And I have a question for you to answer in the comments below. What is the most valuable lesson your parents ever taught you about money or self-worth? I read every single comment, and I can't wait to hear your stories. Thank you for listening, and remember, the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. Stay quiet, stay strong, and I will see you in the next story.